Chapter 1032. In the grotesque space-time tunnel, the white energy created by the torpedoes was like a flood. In front of the flood, two spaceships, one white and one red, were desperately fleeing like startled birds. Xiao AI's expression was very ugly. The enemy has invaded our system and is progressing very quickly. I'll pilot the spaceship. Xinjia, hurry up and stop the invasion. Xinjia immediately stood up and swapped places with Xiao AI. He immediately brought up many screens and started operating. The red warning lights in the command center were already flashing together. Ding Meng, Ling Xingqi, Ji Qinxue, and the others all hated themselves for not being able to help them. Right now was not the time for martial artists to compete, but for statisticians and hackers to display their skills. The speed of Yelan's Peach Blossom spaceship was clearly faster than the Divine Arrow spaceship. The distance between the two spaceships gradually decreased. Little Rascal's expression became even uglier. The main system is being disrupted. We can't send back signals normally. Jia gritted his teeth. I'm doing my best. Xiao AI adjusted her seat. Switched to manual control. A set of light panels immediately popped out from under her seat. They were like molds of various sizes and colors. Xiao AI's hand was already on the surface of these molds. Ding Meng and Ling Xingqi both secretly sucked in a breath. They could be considered people with rich interstellar experience. They knew that manually flying in this kind of environment was extremely risky. If the Peach Blossom spaceship behind them attacked at this moment, they would be done for. However, what they feared would happen. Little Rascal was already giving the order. High-risk energy has locked onto us. Xiao AI, prepare to dodge. In the tunnel, no less than 50 Peach Blossom cannonballs shot out from the front of the Peach Blossom spaceship. They also came in the form of a rain of petals, evenly distributed around the Divine Arrow spaceship. In the next second, everyone knew that the net formed by these cannonballs would fiercely shrink. However, in the next instant, Xiao AI's hand slightly twisted on the mold. A miracle happened. The Divine Arrow spaceship flew up from the rain of petals. In a microsecond, when all the cannonballs were about to close in, it squeezed through one of the few gaps. In fact, this logic was very easy to understand. Previously, these cannonballs were able to repel the Nethersphere mothership because the mothership was too big to dodge. However, now that the Peach Blossom spaceship size had decreased, the cannonball's energy had decreased. This naturally gave the Divine Arrow spaceship a chance. It was like catching a fish in a fishing net. As the fish, it was useless for the fish to charge around randomly. Only when the other party retracted the net would it have a chance to take advantage of the opening. Ding Meng didn't even dare to breathe loudly as he watched. Xiao AI had been with Xinjia for a long time, so she had learned Xinjia's ability to fly against the heavens. The first round of attacks was ineffective, and the Peach Blossom flying ship did not follow up. It was probably shocked by Xiao AI's move. However, the distance between the two parties was still shrinking. It looked like the other party would catch up in at most 10 minutes. Little Rascal decisively ordered, counterattack and slow it down. As soon as he said this, a series of light dots were released from behind the Divine Arrow spaceship. They were like dandelion fragments floating in the tunnel. When the Peach Blossom spaceship flew up, these light dots immediately transformed into a net made of white light. The shape of each net was irregular, and some were spinning, some were flipping, and some were even colliding with each other. The purpose of this blocking formation was to force the other party back into the vortex. However, the pilot of the Peach Blossom spaceship was also very skilled. If Xiao AI's operation was like a fish in water, then the Night Phoenix pilot skill was shocking. The Peach Blossom spaceship did not slow down at all. It weaved left and right in the net of light, as if it was looking for a gap in the rain. It was like it was risking its life to advance through the rain of cannonballs. It was not even scratched at all. Xiao AI's eyes were also a little dazed. Impressive. Little Rascal took a deep breath. The main system still hasn't stopped it. Xinjia's head was lowered as he busied himself. It's very complicated. It'll take at least 20 minutes. Little Rascal said, "There's no time at all. Everyone, prepare to be hit." A bright spot of varying colors suddenly appeared at the tip of the Peach Blossom spaceship's petals. Even the reconnaissance radar could not easily detect it. This bright spot was the energy-gathering battery. With a bang, a multicolored ray shot out. On the surface, it looked like a railgun, but railguns were continuous attacks. However, this ray was not continuous. It was completely like a javelin. The most important thing was that it was very slow. Everyone knew that sometimes the slower the speed, the more dangerous it was. This javelin flew halfway, and with a bang, it split into hundreds of short javelins and flew towards the divine Arrow spaceship like fairies scattering flowers. This situation was simply unavoidable. Little Rascal decisively ordered, "Activate the splitting system." A rain of flowers fell from the sky. All the rays shot towards the rear of the divine Arrow spaceship. First, there was a violent explosion. From a screen, the tail of the divine Arrow spaceship was set ablaze. The divine Arrow spaceship had indeed been hit. But in the next second, the divine Arrow spaceship split into hundreds of clones and spread out evenly in the tunnel. Previously, it had been fairies scattering flowers, but now it was a sky full of afterimages. It was impossible to tell which one was the real divine Arrow spaceship. This was the splitting system of the abnormally powerful divine light technology. Using this opportunity, the divine Arrow spaceship once again left the other party far behind. The Peach Blossom spaceship was probably shocked again. Its continuous attacks were actually ineffective. Now it had to clean up these fake spaceships one by one. This was really a headache. But at this moment, enchantment suddenly turned his head. His expression was extremely ugly. There's still 3 more minutes before the other party completely invades our main system. Either we continue forward or split the system and leave. This was really a helpless move. The Peach Blossom spaceship's performance was far superior to the divine Arrow spaceships. Even an expert like Xing could not stop the other party's invasion. Moreover, they had already used the splitting system once. The energy consumption was rather large. Little Rascal was still silent, but Xiao AI spoke again. The other party's speed is far faster than ours. Looking at the screen again, with the Peach Blossom spaceship as the center, a pink vortex had appeared around it. All the fake spaceships were sucked in one after another. The Peach Blossom spaceship's speed was not affected at all. It was still speeding straight towards the divine Arrow spaceship. Activate the splitting system. Everyone, begin to disperse and leave in batches. Activate the divine light origin protection system and force our way out of the tunnel. Little Rascal finally gave the order. This time, the splitting was not to create fake bodies, but to split in the true sense of the word. The 3 sides of the 3-pronged star were split, and the main body of the spaceship was split into 2. In other words, it was split into 6 smaller divine Arrow spaceships. Each spaceship was covered with a sparkling protective cover. Then, they flew in all directions and forced their way through the chaotic cavern walls in the tunnel. The purpose of doing this was naturally to avoid the flood of wormholes and the Peach Blossom spaceship behind them. However, the consequences were extremely dangerous. The worst-case scenario was that they would be attacked on the way out of the tunnel. The protective cover would be shot down, and the spaceship would not be able to withstand the attack of the cosmic storm and would be crushed into fine powder in the 4-dimensional space. Even if they were not attacked and successfully left the tunnel, the spaceship would be randomly teleported to an unknown region in the 3-dimensional space. The shortest distance to this region was measured in units of tens of thousands of light years. The worst-case scenario was to leave the Holy Splendor system and be teleported to the depths of outer space. However, there was no other way. Right now, Little Rascal Elephant Ming Yin was in one group, Xing Xiao AI was in another group, Ling Xingqi, an ugly woman, was in one group, and Dingming Jiqinxue was in one group. The remaining 2 spaceships would be used to attract the other party's attention. Although the size of the Divine Arrow spaceship was much smaller, its interior was more or less the same. They were all facilities in the form of flowing light, but the light was much dimmer. Ding Ming and Ji Chinxue stood in front of the main control panel, staring at the screen. Right now, they could not do anything. Everything was flying according to the preset AI program. When the spaceship entered the tunnel wall, it felt as if it had sunk into a black ocean. If not for the fact that the entire spaceship was still trembling greatly, they would have thought that they had been teleported out. Ji Chinxue looked at the progress bar on the screen. It will take about 10 minutes for the transmission to be sent out. Ding Ming understood what she meant. If they were attacked in these 10 minutes, even the gods would not be able to save them. However, less than 2 minutes after the progress bar was read, the hull flashed with a warning red light again. A cloud of pink smoke appeared in the empty space. What was going on? Had they been locked on? Ji Chinxue looked at the main control panel. This is bad. A part of the main system was hacked. The spaceship we are on is precisely that part. The other party has already transmitted over. When he turned his head again, he found that the cloud of pink smoke had actually turned into a humanoid form. The smoke slowly dissipated, revealing the appearance of a person. This was a woman. She was wearing a luxurious Taoist robe, just like the clothes of the ancient human world. It gave off a sacred and solemn feeling. This woman was tall and had a gentle and beautiful face. She also had a heroic aura. However, the unique charm she exuded was the same as that of Ling Xingwen. Could this be a martial artist from the Night Phoenix Empire? The woman looked around. Finally, she raised her head and locked her gaze on Ding Ming. It really is this spaceship. Sir Vanguard's judgment was completely correct. A hint of joy appeared on the woman's face. Ding Ming secretly activated the origin and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" "All right, in your human language, I am Vanguard Emoyan's subordinate, Ruyu. You can call me General Ruyu," Ruyu explained while smiling. When she was not smiling, she was full of dignity. When she smiled, a circle of invisible ripples spread out. This aura had no offensive effect, but it made Ji Chinxue feel like he was bathing in a spring breeze. He had a good impression of this Night Phoenix general. However, Ding Ming's heart trembled. Many erotic scenes involuntarily appeared in his mind. Sakas had once explained to him that the Night Phoenix Empire was mostly populated by beautiful women. Most of them cultivated seduction-type martial arts. Therefore, Night Phoenix martial artists were very lethal to many men. Ding Ming forced himself to calm down. He took a deep breath and asked, "What do you want?" Chapter 1033. Ruyu once again revealed a charming smile. Ding Ming instantly felt a sharp pain in his head, as if he was being pricked by needles. Ji Chinxue, on the other hand, revealed a strange smile. He wobbled towards Ruyu like a marionette, as if he was under some kind of mind control. "Chinxue," Ding Ming snapped. "Don't do anything stupid." Ji Chinxue was completely out of control. He continued to walk forward. Ruyu's smile grew even sweeter. "Look, even your companion is so friendly to me. Why don't you hurry over?" Ding Ming's eyes turned cold. His gaze focused on Ji Chinxue's belt. Ji Chinxue was immediately pulled back by telekinesis. Ding Ming couldn't be bothered to imbue his energy. He raised his hand and slashed at Ji Chinxue's left temple. Ji Chinxue's eyes rolled back. His entire body swayed, and then he fell unconscious to the ground. Ruyu wasn't surprised by Ding Ming's actions. She continued to smile. "I won't hurt her. My aura won't harm her either." "I know." Ding Ming was expressionless. As long as a Night One warrior didn't use any offensive techniques, their aura was indeed harmless to women. However, this Ruyu was too strong. Ji Chinxue couldn't even resist her aura. Mo Yin had claimed to be the vanguard for the demon's teleportation this time. This meant that the main force was still behind them. This Ruyu was only a vanguard subordinate, yet she was already so accomplished. One could only imagine how terrifying the main force of the Night One Empire was. No wonder Sakas and Little Rascal had reminded him more than once that true interstellar powerhouses were existences that people could only look up to. He was still very weak. Ruyu was still smiling. "Come over and submit to us. You can have whatever you want. I'm definitely not making empty promises." Ding Ming nodded. "I can see that powerhouses like you aren't making empty promises. However, there must be conditions for me to submit, right? If I had no value, would the Night Luan Empire tolerate the existence of men? There was a trace of satisfaction in Ryu's smile. That's right. Lord Moyen has already sensed that someone on your ship has the aura of planet AIG. Tell me, where's the solitary entropy? Where was the heaven-defying sovereign king? As long as the news is verified, the goddess will reward you handsomely. Ding Meng sighed inwardly. The Night Phoenix Empire had indeed come for this. If it was a blessing, it wouldn't be a disaster. If it was a disaster, it would be inevitable. Since he had come into contact with such a huge secret as silent entropy, it was only a matter of time before he attracted the attention of the Six Weaves. You got the wrong person, Ding Meng replied coldly. Ryu smiled and said, you don't have to deny it. In such a remote galaxy in the universe, there are still remnants of AIG people's aura. This must have been left behind by the Heaven Emperor. So you track me all the way here? Ding Meng asked calmly. Ryu smiled and said, our forces have already been planted in the human world of your Holy Glory faction. Ding Meng said, Nanshuan and Lingxingwen? Ryu smiled and said, that's right. Lingxingwen seems to have been destroyed by you. However, this is a small matter. As long as you tell us about the solitary entropy, not only will we let bygones be bygones, we will also reward you handsomely. Ding Meng sighed and said, what if I refuse? Ryu said, I believe you will make a wise choice. Ding Meng didn't reply. He had already raised the power of the 10 diamond origin points and pushed them to the limit. Sensing his aura skyrocketing, Ryu's smile finally disappeared. Do you know that you're playing with fire? Lord Moyen has already given you a chance to live. It was because of your existence that she didn't launch an all-out attack. Otherwise, you and your ship would have been destroyed. Ding Meng sneered and said, so should I thank you? Ryu said indifferently, once you are captured alive, we have plenty of ways to dissect your body and obtain information about the solitary entropy from your memories. In the end, you won't be able to die even if you want to. Ding Meng took a deep breath again and said, capture me alive. Let's see if you have the ability to do so. Ryu didn't speak anymore. Her eyes suddenly turned cold. Ding Meng suddenly felt an extremely powerful force coming toward him. This wasn't a martial technique or an aura. It was a flow of air similar to telepathic thoughts. In Ding Meng's eyes, the robed Ryu's body emitted rings of light. She was like a holy light descending from the heavens, like a fairy descending to the mortal world. She was so noble that no one dared to look at her directly. Ding Meng's heart skipped a beat. This was clearly psychic power. The Astral Codex explained that there was a unique psychic power in the telepathic category. It was much more advanced than the psychic and illusory categories. It interfered with one's brainwaves, affected one's retina, and stimulated the secretion of hormones in one's brain. It was a classic example of PEA. If one saw Ryu as a fairy, she would be noble and holy. If one saw her as a slut, she would be flirting. The power of this kind of psychic power didn't depend on the caster, but on one's mental state. To put it bluntly, what kind of person one was would immediately react accordingly. The power of a Night Luan martial artist could be seen at a glance. However, Ding Meng's state of mind was extremely firm. Even though these rings of light swept past him, his expression didn't change at all. Ryu was somewhat surprised. I didn't expect you to be so unyielding. You aren't willing to submit. As soon as she spoke, Ding Meng moved. His entire body suddenly flashed and appeared above Ryu's head. His hand viciously chopped down. Ryu's lips curled into a smile. Not bad. The shoulder straps of her Taoist robe suddenly rose up and straightened in an instant. Ding Meng's hand struck the shoulder straps as if they had struck a steel plate. He was immediately sent flying. Before he even landed, Ryu had already arrived behind him. Her slender, jade-like hand gently reached out. Ding Meng suddenly felt a gentle yet vigorous aura quietly approach from behind him. He knew that this was his opponent's killing move. He decisively stretched out his limbs. Shwa, Overlord's mountain crumbling force. This time, a semi-arc plating layer with a thickness of 1 meter was blasted out. Ryu's expression changed. She reached out with her other jade-like hand and pressed her palms against the plating to stop the incoming force. However, the plating's energy was too strong. She was actually pushed back by the plating. The layer of light beneath her feet dimmed, and white origin flames ignited along the way. The flames scattered in all directions, and in the blink of an eye, the command center was ablaze. Ryu was pushed back about 30 meters before she could stabilize herself. The peach blossom energy in her palms slowly neutralized the Overlord's mountain-crushing energy. However, Ding Ming suddenly descended from the sky again. This time, his hand blade was a double-edged attack. "You're still coming?" Ryu was clearly annoyed. She waved her hands in a circle, and a mirror image of peach blossom petals appeared above her head. Ding Ming's hand blade chopped down, and the mirror image wrapped around his hands like a stream of water. Ding Ming immediately felt as if he had stopped moving, and his body stiffened for a second. It was also in this second that Ryu elegantly turned around. The hem of her luxurious robe flipped, and the wind that it stirred up blew Ding Ming away. There was a muffled boom. Ding Ming's back had actually shattered the light curtain on the wall, and the wall turned into specks of light that drifted in all directions. Ryu said proudly, "Not bad. In such a remote galaxy, your skills are enough to dominate holy splendor. No wonder you're unwilling to submit. However, in front of an advanced civilization, you're still an ant-like existence." Ding Ming stared at Ryu. He slowly stood up. In fact, his arm was trembling slightly at this moment. His palm was burning with pain, as if his flesh had been badly mutilated and had been sprinkled with chili powder. The Night Luan warrior's energy seemed charming and gentle, but it was not soft at all when it came to beating people up. Ding Ming had not encountered such a powerful enemy in many years. The condition of his arm could not be hidden from the other party's eyes. Ryu smiled charmingly and said, "It's not too late to submit now. How do you want me to submit?" Ding Ming asked calmly. Ryu's eyes were like silk. "Crawl over here, kneel on the ground, and lick my toes clean. If you tell me the whereabouts of solitary entropy, I'll reward you handsomely." As she spoke, she took off the embroidered gold shoe on her left foot, revealing a flawless white foot. "Okay." Ding Ming knelt down without hesitation. His hands pressed against the ground, and he did indeed make a crawling motion. However, the moment his palms touched the ground, two electric currents suddenly appeared on the ground and rushed towards each other. Most of the facilities on the spaceship were in the form of light, and Ding Ming's movements were very subtle, so these two electric currents were almost impossible to detect. This was also Ding Ming's usual style. If he could not fight head-on, then he would find a way to take advantage of the situation. The two electric currents were the void electric wall. Halfway through, they suddenly soared and formed an electric net that cut towards Ryu's upper body. As a Night Phoenix general, her eyesight was not for show. Ryu immediately sensed that this electric net was not made of electromagnetic energy. She knew that she would be in trouble if she attacked, so she did not care about her image and rolled on the ground, dodging under the electric net. This roll of hers was actually within Ding Ming's expectations. This was because Ding Ming rolled even faster, covering more than 10 meters in a single roll. Then, he stood up and pounced on Ryu like a wolf. He grabbed Ryu's ankle and swung her around, throwing her to the wall that he had just fallen from. Although the exchange between the two of them was simple, Ding Ming could sense that this demon general's foundation was very deep. She was at least a high-level combat fighter with an index of 8 trillion points. This was far beyond Ling Xingwen. Therefore, Ding Ming did not dare to be careless. After he threw Ryu out, he did not even wait for her to land. He pushed his hand back, and with a muffled bang, a bright current rushed out from his palm and directly destroyed the wall, control panel, and passage on the other side. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, boom, boom. The command hall continued to explode and tremble. The red warning light once again turned red. Ding Ming did not stop. He continued to spit out essence. He did not expect this current to melt the other party, but it was enough as long as it was effective. As expected, after the white beam of light burned for a long time, the other end of the beam of light started to turn pink. The pink energy flow started to grow stronger and actually started to bite back. Although Ryu's true body could not be seen, her energy aura soared again and directly broke through 10 trillion points. Ding Meng's expression changed. He turned to look at Ji Qinxue on the ground. After he injected his telekinesis, Ji Qinxue immediately woke up. The two of them had been through many battles together, so they immediately established a telepathic link. Ji Qinxue said in surprise, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Ding Meng panicked. "Hurry up, before she starts her real counterattack." Ji Qinxue did not say anything. He immediately turned around and flew toward the control panel. Chapter 1034. The progress bar on the control panel had reached 32%. The speed was really slow. The Divine Arrow spaceship still needed at least 6 more minutes to get out of the space-time tunnel. However, Ji Qinxue rushed up and pressed a bunch of buttons. She did not understand the profound hacking knowledge of Hongku, but she still knew how to shut down the system completely. The light screen above the control panel dimmed, extinguished, and disappeared one after another. The confrontation between Ding Meng and Ryu continued. The pink energy was getting closer and closer. The light beam now had 2 colors. Ryu's cold voice sounded from the pink energy. "What are you doing?" Ji Qinxue did not answer at all. According to Ding Meng's instructions, she shut down the communication, reconnaissance, energy storage, defense, and many other systems. The purpose of doing so was to prevent the Peach Blossom spaceship from sending martial artists over. If 2 Ryus were to fight against 1 Ding Meng, then Ding Meng would have no chance. It would be better to just surrender. Bang! Suddenly, an even thinner light beam shot out from the pink energy and hit Ji Qinxue's chest like lightning. Pooh! Ji Qinxue spat out a mouthful of white blood and flew backward. The armor of the Steel Legion was penetrated, and there was a bloody hole in his chest. This time, Ji Qinxue was not unconscious. He was seriously injured. It was hard to say whether he was dead or alive. Ding Meng was furious, but he still managed to retain a bit of rationality in his anger. Before Ryu could make a second move, Ding Meng's other hand slapped out again. Another white torrent surged out. This time, the source of the torrent was not Ryu, but the control panel. Even the facilities of the Godly Arrow spaceship could not compete with the power of a star-level warrior, not to mention that this was just a small ship that was split from the spaceship. As the torrent rolled over, the main control panel turned into a mess and smoke. Now the spaceship had completely lost control in the chaos of the space-time tunnel. The final result was whether Ryu killed Ding Meng or Ding Meng killed Ryu. Everyone would be buried in the turbulence of the four-dimensional space. Ding Meng's distraction allowed Ryu's energy to gain the upper hand. The pink energy pushed back along the light beam. Ding Meng's palm exploded, and he was sent flying again. This explosion also caused the entire spaceship to shake violently. All the light facilities in the command hall dimmed, and debris kept falling from the ceiling. It seemed that it was only a matter of time before the spaceship disintegrated. The light beam disappeared, and Ryu's figure reappeared from the ruins. At this moment, her Taoist robe was torn in many places, and her face was blue and purple. Obviously, Ding Meng's thunderous attack just now had seriously injured her. If Ryu had always been a smiling beauty, then her face was now hideous, like a monster that changed faces. "You've angered me, really." Ryu stared at Ding Meng fiercely. "We'll talk about the solitary entropy later. Today you must die." Circles of pink light spread out from her body, and even the flowing lights around her were dyed pink. She had completely turned into a pink human-shaped pupil. Aura Index, 28 trillion points. This was the strength of a mid-level revered martial artist. Ding Meng was not in a better state. His internal organs were in discomfort, and the luster of the diamond origin was dimming. He could no longer launch such a powerful attack. Ryu in front of him had once again broken the limit of his strength, but he was not afraid. Instead, he calmed down. Had he not experienced many similar situations in the past? So what if you're a Night Phoenix warrior? I'll show you my true strength. With a whoosh, Ding Ming's figure blurred, like a human figure in a whirlpool. This is... Ruyu was stunned for a moment, and then she became ecstatic. It's indeed the aura of someone from AIG. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Ding Ming's figure was not only blurred, but there were also many whirlpools floating around him, like a mass of ghostly chaos. Ruyu's tone changed. No, I remember now. It's the fiery sun divine skill. Ding Ming's aura index was also surging like a storm. This was the result of his cultivation in the solitary entropy for the past 3 years. 10 trillion points, 15 trillion points, 20 trillion points, 25 trillion points. Ryu was stunned. How could an ant-like human warrior cultivate to such a level? Impossible. This is impossible. Ryu muttered to herself. She even forgot to attack. With a clang, a golden butterfly mark finally lit up in the whirlpool. Ding Ming's aura finally stopped at 30 trillion points. To be honest, this number was higher than Ryu's, but it was far from being able to kill her instantly. In other words, if the two of them were to fight for real, they would either be evenly matched, or it would take a long time. There was no possibility of a one-hit kill. However, Ryu was actually retreating, and her voice became trembling. You, Heaven-Defying King. Heaven-Defying King's butterfly mark. You're actually the successor of Heaven-Defying King. Ding Ming's heart suddenly jolted. He recalled the story of the Sovereign King when he was still alive. The Sovereign King married the Goddess of Beauty, which was actually the union of the AG Star Empire and the Night One Empire. If the Goddess of Beauty was invincible, how could she compromise and marry the Sovereign King? At the end of the day, it was still a matter of strength. Just like the comparison between the Ardent Sun Divine skill and the Night Phoenix Martial skill. One was the butterfly mark, while the other was the peach blossom mirror. Although the peach blossom was beautiful, the butterfly had a life of its own. In front of the dancing butterfly, the peach blossom would always be a foil. It was destined to never soar. After using the secret skill Bright Spirit to forcefully increase his strength, Ding Ming had an idea. He lowered his voice and roared, Heaven-Defying King is here. You women, kneel down and accept your death. He was taking a huge risk again. He was betting on the fact that the king was all-powerful and could dominate the Milky Way. Everyone who saw him would tremble in fear and kneel down to submit. He guessed that the Night Phoenix martial artists would be afraid of the king. There was an instinctive fear in their hearts. As expected, after hearing Ding Ming's roar, Ryu couldn't help but take a few steps back. Her face revealed a look of horror. Rise! Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ding Ming waved his hand. 2 glittering, sacred butterflies flew out of the vortex and started a circle around the main control panel. Taking advantage of Ryu's moment of distraction, Ding Ming was able to execute this move. Open. As Ding Ming's hands moved, the 2 sacred butterflies had already circled around the main control panel. Their flight path formed a circle. At this moment, the air was shaking like water waves. The circle turned into fog, and the fog turned into a vortex. When the energy dissipated, it turned into a small space-time crack. One could see the chaotic stars inside the wormhole flying by with the naked eye. The secret skill Extinction of the Ardent Sun Divine skill was used once again. This was not the first time he had used it. However, the scale of his use this time was much smaller. Ding Ming didn't have the ability to send an interstellar martial venerable to another space-time, but it was enough to send Ryu from inside of the spaceship to the chaotic tunnel outside. The torrent of interstellar torpedoes and the cosmic storm of the space-time tunnel were enough to tear anything into dust. At this moment, the small wormhole started to spin, producing a strong gravitational force. All the light from the various equipment in the command center was sucked in. The light was distorted, gathered, and disappeared. The wormhole was as dazzling as a colorful pupil. Ryu finally understood what Ding Ming was doing. Don't even think about it. Her pupil body once again erupted with solid pink energy, forming a petal-shaped shield around her. This time, Ding Ming once again used all his strength. His palms controlled the wormhole from a distance. In an instant, not only was the light being sucked in, but all the control panels, tables, chairs, steel plates, and gates of various sizes were all twisted into arcs and sucked into the wormhole like water. Although Ryu's shield was not completely absorbed, the surging energy on the shield was also affected by the gravitational force. Strands of energy were sucked out, entering the wormhole like rays of light. The power of this wormhole was so great that Ryu's expression finally became terrifying. She could ignore Ding Meng alone, but with his identity as the successor of the Lingtian sovereign, things were different. Go to hell. Ryu flung her robes, and a pink claw image flew towards Ding Meng. Ding Meng's eyes were as wide as copper bells. Now that all the energy in his body was concentrated on the wormhole, he had no time to deal with other martial arts techniques. At this moment, he could only use telekinesis to take it head-on. In the Galaxy Codex, there was a basic telekinesis technique called conduction. It did not have any offensive or defensive properties, but it could successfully guide almost all the energy in the universe. The essence of applied telekinesis could not be learned, but it could be imitated. There was another ripple in the air. Suddenly, an invisible air current appeared in the air, like a warm spring breeze. As the pink claw flew over, it was immediately stopped by the air current. Then, the air current wrapped around it and slowly changed its direction. With a swoosh, the claw actually flew towards the wormhole. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the depths of the wormhole. You go in too. Ding Meng roared angrily. The 8 origin vortices in his body were pushed to their limits, and the entire command hall spun and twisted. Ryu's shield was sucked in the wormhole like a piece of paper. Then, her body also floated uncontrollably towards the wormhole. How is this possible? How is this possible? Ryu finally screamed. Oh no, no, no. As her voice increased in decibels, her body was also twisted into the wormhole like an arc. The wormhole flashed, then closed and turned back into a butterfly. The butterfly turned into a singularity and flew into Ding Meng's forehead. At this moment, Ding Meng fell to his knees with a thump. In less than a minute, he had almost exhausted all the origin power and essence in his body. The spaceship was still shaking violently, and it was on the verge of disintegration. Ding Meng raised his hand to help Ji Qinxue up. Ji Qinxue's breath was weak. Ding Meng poured the last of his healing energy into Ji Qinxue's forehead before he could sit up. What awaited him now was very likely true death. The command hall was already a sea of fire. All the major facilities were falling apart. Other than the violent shaking, his vision was also affected. He felt as if the spaceship had entered a foreign galaxy. Everything in front of him was gradually becoming blurry. A long-lost tiredness continued to surge. Ding Meng slowly closed his eyes. Chapter 1035. The spaceship did not disintegrate as he had imagined. In Ding Meng's consciousness, the spaceship seemed to have crashed into something with a loud bang, followed by a whirlwind. The only thing Ding Meng could do was to sit cross-legged and close his eyes in silence. He had suffered a heavy blow from Ryu, and all his energy had been depleted. Therefore, he needed to use the remaining essence from the smelting space to heal his injuries. As long as one didn't suffer a fatal blow after entering the ranks of interstellar martial artists, one's soul wouldn't be destroyed under normal circumstances. On the beach in the elementary consciousness space, the apparition was also sitting cross-legged on the beach with its eyes closed. Not long after, the apparition opened its eyes. It stood up and looked at the sea. The image in the mirror slowly blurred. What was going on? Ding Meng felt very strange. Logically speaking, the apparition was his consciousness and should be under his control. Why did it disappear on its own? A voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Ding Meng, are you feeling better? When will you wake up? It sounded like Ji Qinxue's voice. There was some anticipation in the voice, but more than that, there was anxiety. At this time, Ding Meng finally opened his eyes. Ji Qinxue's beautiful face was right in front of him. You're finally awake. Ji Qinxue showed a long-lost smile. Ding Ming looked at her chest. "You're better." Ji Chinshua nodded gratefully and sighed. "You saved me again. If it wasn't for your healing essence, I might have died." Ding Ming looked around and found that he was still inside the divine aerospace ship. However, all the lights in the command hall had been extinguished. The floor was a mess of wreckage. The entire spaceship had lost its momentum. "We're saved?" Ding Ming asked suspiciously. "The spaceship broke through the space-time tunnel." Ji Chinshua smiled bitterly. "I only know that we're still alive. I don't know the exact situation." Ding Ming suddenly grabbed Ji Chinshua's arm and touched her shoulder. There was a thin layer of dust on it. "It seems like a long time has passed," Ji Chinshua said. "Based on my rough estimation, more than 200 hours have passed." Ding Ming was surprised. "I was unconscious for 10 days. Ji Chinshua nodded. "More or less?" Ding Ming asked curiously. "Where are we now?" Ji Chinshua smiled bitterly again. "I don't know where this place is, but this is the first time I've seen the outside. Bring me out to have a look." Ding Ming got up. Ji Chinshua supported him as they walked towards the connecting passage. The divine aerospace ship had been severely damaged during this operation. There were wreckage and debris along the way, and the passage was distorted. The originally exquisite interior was now full of potholes, and there were even puddles in many places. Ji Chinshua explained, "Your ardent sun divine power has caused great damage to the spaceship. Many parts of the spaceship have been sucked through." Ding Ming smiled bitterly. "That Ru Yu is a mid-level martial venerable. If I didn't use all my strength, I wouldn't have been able to send her away." Ji Chinshua nodded. "I know, but it's not your fault. We're lucky to be alive." Her tone was filled with deep gratitude. She did not know how many times Ding Ming had pulled her back from the brink of death. Deep down, she had long developed a sense of dependence on Ding Ming. For example, right now, she should have been supporting Ding Ming, but she took the initiative to hold Ding Ming's arm. They were extremely close. As they walked out of the connecting passage, they were greeted by the golden sunlight, which shone warmly on their bodies. The first thing that came into view was the surrounding mountains. The mountain slopes were not high, but they were alternately blue, purple, and green. Ding Ming and Ru Yu were standing on a grassland at the foot of the mountain. The grass was not lush green, but a type of long grass that glowed with a blue luster. Its shape was like a green foxtail that had been enlarged several times. It was blue and furry, and the grassland stretched for hundreds of meters. As the sunlight shone down, the blue grass swayed with the wind and joined together. It was as if the grass had a life of its own, waving at Ding Ming and Ru Yu. It was so blue that it was mesmerizing. Ji Chinshua reached out to stroke a long grass and explained with a smile, "I can confirm that this is not within the Federal Empire's borders because I've never seen this type of vegetation before. However, this grass is indeed very beautiful." Ding Ming did not seem to hear what she said. He slowly took 2 steps forward and also reached out to stroke the swaying grass. If one looked closely at his eyes, there was a strong sense of nostalgia in his gaze. Ji Chinshua seemed to have noticed that something was wrong with his expression. He went forward in confusion. "What's wrong? Have you seen this type of grass before?" "Yes, I have." Ding Ming's usually calm voice actually had a hint of excitement. "Not only have I seen it, but I've also had many dealings with it. When I was young, I was so poor that I couldn't afford to eat, so I often came to collect this type of grass and carried them to the town's market to trade for things. Each 5 bundles of grass could only be exchanged for 70 coins, and 70 coins could only be exchanged for a small bag of flour. However, it took 3 days to collect 5 bundles of grass." Ji Chinshua was stunned. Ding Ming turned his head and asked, "Do you know what this grass is used for?" Ji Chinshua could only shake his head. Ding Ming smiled. "After it's decomposed, it can be added to various types of clothing to produce a colorful effect. This type of grass is called starweave grass." "Starweave grass?" Ji Chinshua was shocked. Through Ding Ming's previous telepathic message, she also knew about Ding Ming's past. At this moment, she could not help but cry out, "Could this place be the territory of the Shang Kingdom, and we've been transported to a foreign planet?" Ding Meng's eyes were bright. I also hope that we've been transported to the Dasheng Kingdom, but I can't be sure yet. Ji Chenxue turned to look at the spaceship. The spaceship was almost an empty shell. If it were to be seen by someone who did not know the truth, they would probably think that it was a pile of scrap metal. Back then, I shut down all the major systems, and you destroyed the main control panel. Now that the spaceship has no power source, there's no record of the incident at all, so we have no idea where we are. Forget it. Ding Meng waved his hand. Now is not the time to discuss this. Let's rest for a while and try to recover as much as possible. As he spoke, he sat down beside the grass and looked at the swaying star-weave grass with emotion. The faces and smiles of many people appeared in front of his eyes again. Ji Chenxue also sat down beside him and sighed with emotion. I really didn't expect that after returning from the Silent Entropy Empire, we would be transported here. This is just like a dream. I didn't expect Sister Sun to be from the Night Phoenix Empire. When she mentioned this, Ding Meng could not help but sigh. Actually, I should have known that her identity was not simple. Back at the Star Mao Shrine, she had already revealed a flaw. What kind of flaw? Ji Chenxue's interest was piqued. Ding Meng pondered and said, "You guys probably did not know because you were all knocked out at the time. I've always been curious. Back then, Ling Xingwen was so powerful that she could kill Ji Chenyu, Guan Wuming, Ling Tian, and Ling Long in a single move. However, in the end, she did not kill Nanxuan. She only pushed Nanxuan back 100 meters. Even though Nanxuan cultivated the transformational telekinesis, Ling Xingwen was an interstellar marshal supreme at the time. No matter how Nanxuan transformed, Ling Xingwen's remaining power could have turned her into dust on the spot. However, Ling Xingwen did not do so. Ji Chenxue hesitated. Just based on this point alone, you can't prove that she's a Night Phoenix warrior, right? Indeed, you can't. Ding Meng nodded. But she is indeed suspicious. Logically speaking, she is an expert who has been around for more than 100 years. The transformational telekinesis is a rare type in the universe. How did she awaken it? How did she manage to cultivate such a high level of strength? These are all secrets. He paused for a moment before continuing. Actually, after this incident, I have a bold guess about the overall situation. What kind of overall situation? Ji Chenxue was curious. Ding Meng sighed. Actually, it all started from the battle between Ling Tian King and the 6 experts. That battle led to the fall of the AI G-Star Kingdom. The Mao Xingwen Kingdom, the Huck race, the Devil Sky Empire, and the Night Phoenix Empire were all involved. After Ling Tian King was defeated, he used solitary entropy to escape to our Saint Glory main star system. I think that even if solitary entropy's hyperspace space jump system was activated, there should be some traces left behind. Ji Chenxue hurriedly asked, so the people of the other countries and races all followed. Ding Meng nodded. First, it was the Mao Xingwen royal family. The elders came to ask for help. Then, it was the Devil Sky Empire. They came to kill the elders. Then, it was the Night Phoenix Empire. They came for Ling Tian King. Every country seemed to have different goals, but they were all the same. They all came for solitary entropy. Ji Chenxue was deep in thought. Maybe it's not as simple as solitary entropy, but the legendary Holy Temple. Ding Meng said, that's right. If you figure this out, it's not hard to understand why Wen Yang joined the Hidden Front, why the Elder Princess hid in the Black Handprint, why the Immortal Essence King hid on the Flame Star, and why Ling Xingwen and Nanxuan hid in the human world and waited patiently for news. Ji Chenxue sighed. I have a feeling that Sister Sun is not willing to work for the Night Phoenix Empire. She seems to have some difficulties. Actually, she was not the only one who felt this way. Even Ding Meng felt the same way. Nanxuan had always been very friendly to everyone. If someone really wanted to ruin Ding Meng's plans, Nanxuan would have had plenty of opportunities and the ability to do so. However, when the Night Phoenix warriors came, Nanxuan did not forget to remind Ding Meng to run for his life. There must be a deeper reason for this. Ji Chenxue looked around. Our vitality has been greatly damaged. Look at this place. There is no energy source. What do we do next? Ding Meng smiled bitterly. Let's not think about leaving this place for now. Let's figure out where we are first. Ji Qinxue hesitated. Then, are we leaving? Let's go. Ding Meng made a decisive decision. Ji Qinxue immediately stood up to help him. However, this time, Ji Qinxue did not hold Ding Meng's arm. Instead, she took the initiative to hold Ding Meng's hand. Ding Meng could not help but turn to look at her. I still have strength. At least I can walk. Ji Qinxue blushed slightly. I still feel that your hand is more comfortable to hold. Ding Meng was a little puzzled. His hand was almost like granite because of the long period of battle. She still felt comfortable. When he turned to look again, Ji Qinxue's face was red. She lowered her head shyly. Chapter 1036. The warm afternoon sun shone on the blue grassland. The continuous star-weave grass had a refreshing beauty, but Ding Meng walked very slowly. He seemed to be enjoying the pleasure of walking, but at the same time, he seemed to be reminiscing about the past. Ji Qinxue held his hand and accompanied him as they strolled through the wheat fields. For them, this kind of time was very rare. There was no deception, no swords, and the return to nature calmed them down. Ji Qinxue could see that Ding Meng's expression was full of reminiscence. She couldn't help but ask, "This must be the Desheng Kingdom, right?" Ding Meng nodded affirmatively this time. "This is the Desheng Kingdom. I can't be wrong, because I've been here before." At this time, the two of them had reached the end of the mountain range. After climbing over a slope, their field of vision brightened. They saw an endless field of star-weave grass that stretched far into the distance. Several large rivers meandered through the field, and the colors of these rivers were constantly changing. It looked like a fairy tale world. "It's so beautiful," Ji Qinxue exclaimed. Ding Meng sighed. "It looks beautiful, but it's not suitable for people to live in." Ji Qinxue asked why. Ding Meng said, "The starweave grass itself contains a trace of poison, and the starweave grass here is too lush. Their excess poison is discharged into the river, so the river looks beautiful, but it's not suitable for people to live in. We are divine light warriors, so we can't feel it, but ordinary people can't survive here for too long." Ji Qinxue was a little confused. "But you've been here before?" Ding Meng smiled. "Do you know the name of this place?" Ji Qinxue asked, "What's the name?" "It's called Rosy Cloud Plating." Ding Meng explained. "It's on the southern border of the Desheng Kingdom." Ji Qinxue was surprised. "This is your hometown?" Ding Meng nodded, and his eyes dimmed. "I've told you before that I lived here since I was a child. Like many children in the village, I had to cut grass every day with tools. After a long time, many people were poisoned and slowly died of illness." Ji Qinxue asked, "What about your parents?" Ding Meng looked into the distance. "I don't have parents. I heard from the elders in the village that I grew up eating the food of hundreds of families." Ji Qinxue suddenly felt sad. Ding Meng. Ding Meng was struggling in the same time. At this moment, words were unnecessary. Ji Qinxue held Ding Meng's hand tightly. Ding Meng seemed to feel her concern and could not help but wrap her arms around her slender waist. Ji Qinxue rested her head on his shoulder and said faintly, "You must have suffered a lot to be able to live to this day." Ding Meng shook his head and said with a smile, "This is nothing. When I was 6 years old, this place was scorched. The army of the immortal travel country attacked, and the village was turned into ruins overnight. I had to escape north with the others." Ji Qinxue knew what happened later. Ding Meng met Ding Wenhe, the little girl, the protector, Uncle Niu, Zheng Ming, his elder brother, the princess Yu Xingyang, Long Yao. These people had been dead for many years, but they lived forever in Ding Meng's heart and encouraged him to move forward. Ji Qinxue couldn't imagine how Ding Meng felt when he revisited this place. Ding Meng. Ji Qinxue suddenly stopped in her tracks. Ding Meng turned around in confusion. "What's wrong?" Ji Qinxue sighed. "If one day you could end all the grudges and disputes, would you be willing to come back to this place to live?" Ding Meng smiled bitterly again. "I want to. I don't have any other skills, but I'm good at being a coolie." Unfortunately, Ji Qinxue also understood that there were many things waiting for Ding Meng to do. They couldn't be finished in a short time. I'm just asking. Ji Chinxue hurriedly explained. Ding Meng seemed to know what she was thinking. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. If that day really comes, no matter where we go, I'll take you with me." Really? Ji Chinxue jumped up like a child. Ding Meng smiled and said, "Of course." If other men had said this, they might have thought that he was trying to coax her, but Ji Chinxue knew that Ding Meng was a man of his words. This was definitely a huge promise. "Let's go." Ji Chinxue took the initiative to hold Ding Meng's hand and ran forward happily. "I want to see the places you've been to." They walked along several rivers to an open area. The terrain gradually became flat, and the number of grass fields decreased. Finally, there was a trace of green in their field of vision. It was the normal green water and green mountains. The rivers converged into a big river. The water was green and clear. They could see wooden fishing boats drifting on the river. There were people fishing on the boats with fishing rods. Ding Meng was a little surprised. "When I left, this place was devastated. I didn't expect that there would be people here again. Has peace been restored at the border?" "It should be. Look over there." Ji Chinxue pointed to a small grass field by the river. There was a group of 5 or 6-year-old children in the grass. They were wearing fish-skin gloves and holding sickles, concentrating on cutting the grass. Seeing their skillful movements, Ding Meng couldn't help but sigh. They're all children from poor families. Otherwise, they wouldn't be working at such a young age. The faces of these children were still very young, but their skin was rough and coarse. There were thick calluses on each of their wrists, indicating that they had been doing manual labor for a long time. Ding Meng noticed that there was a little girl in the grass field who was particularly eye-catching. Her cutting speed was very fast, and her hands and feet were very agile. Just like Ding Wenhe in the past, she had cut down a large patch of grass in no time. Then, she found a rope and tied a large bundle of grass to her back. Ji Chinxue couldn't bear to watch. She was only a little girl, but she was already bent over by the star-weave grass at such a young age. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. Ding Meng and Ji Chinxue didn't expect. The little girl hadn't walked far with a bundle of grass on her back when the group of boys behind her swarmed up and swung their sickles at her back. Ji Chinxue was shocked. Are they trying to rob her? Ding Meng didn't say anything. This kind of thing was all too common. Back then, he had done the same thing. He had found a frozen gray steamed bun, and it had attracted more than a dozen children to try and rob it. When a person couldn't stand the hunger, they would do anything. However, upon closer inspection, it didn't seem right. Although these people were children from poor families, their clothes were still intact. They weren't the kind of ragged beggars or refugees. They weren't the kind of people who would collapse at any time due to hunger. There was no reason for them to snatch other people's bundles. Ding Meng was still in a daze when cries of surprise came from the grass field. Upon closer inspection, even he was surprised. The little girl was already lying in a pool of blood. She had suffered at least 20 to 30 cuts all over her body. Although these wounds were not fatal, 3 of her fingers had been cut off, and the tendons and veins in her elbows and ankles had been severed. The other boys had scattered after snatching the bundle of grass. Ji Chinxue sucked in a breath of cold air. How could a 5 or 6-year-old child be so ruthless? Ding Meng also felt that something was amiss. "Let's go and take a look." The little girl was helped up by Ji Chinxue. Her face was too young, but it carried a stubbornness and maturity that did not match her age. Her eyebrows were tightly furrowed, and her expression was cold. She did not even cry out in pain. Ding Meng was about to step forward, but Ji Chinxue stopped him. "Let me do this." The little girl was an ordinary person. Ji Chinxue only needed to infuse a small amount of source energy to heal her injuries. It was only when her severed fingers were reattached that a trace of surprise appeared on the little girl's face. "What's your name?" Ji Chinxue asked in a friendly manner. The little girl was not shy. "Big Flower." This was obviously a nickname, but Ding Meng knew that she was definitely a child from a poor family. The Flourishing Kingdom had a caste system. Those who had a real name often had origins. To put it simply, many children of unknown people on the border only had a nickname. There was no surname to check. The poor could not even afford to eat, so why would they care about their name? "Big Flower, where's your home?" Ji-Chin-Shue's smile made the little girl feel at ease. Big Flower pointed into the distance. Apricot Village. Ji-Chin-Shue asked, "Is there anyone at home?" Big Flower replied straightforwardly, "Grandma's here." Ji-Chin-Shue patted her shoulder. "Let me take you home, okay?" Big Flower shook her head. "There is no grass." Ji-Chin-Shue was stunned. He did not understand what she meant. Ding Ming stepped forward and sighed. "She hasn't cut the grass yet. Without grass, there's no flower. Without flour, she and her grandma will starve." Ding Ming bent over and said, "Big Flower, let me help you cut the grass, okay?" Big Flower hesitated. "You know how to cut grass?" Ding Ming smiled. "I came here to cut grass when I was young. At that time, we didn't have any tools, so we had to pick them slowly by hand. These starweave grass are actually divided into many colors. The blue ones have the least amount of poison and are the most suitable for harvesting. The red ones are flammable, so it's best not to pick them on a hot day or it will catch fire easily. The most dangerous ones are the black ones. They are very poisonous. Even children can't get close to them. You can't even touch them." As he spoke, he waved his hand casually, and large patches of starweave grass in the field fell to the ground. Big Flower's eyes widened. "Teach me." Ding Ming smiled. "Okay, take me to Apricot Village, and I will teach you." Big Flower led the way without another word. Ji-Chin-Shue also used her telekinesis to gather the bundles of grass together and float them in the air. She took Big Flower's hand and secretly sent a telepathic message to Ding Ming. "You really want to teach her?" Ding Ming said, "Can't you see that she is about to awaken as an origin ability user? However, telekinesis can't be taught, but helping her become an origin ability user won't be a problem." Ji-Chin-Shue was shocked. "But she is a 5 or 6-year-old origin ability user." Ding Ming explained, "I only found out after I went to the Federal Empire that the Shang Kingdom's origin ability users have a very high chance of awakening. In the Federal Empire, only 1 or 2 origin ability users can awaken among tens of thousands of people. However, in the Shang Kingdom, only 1 out of 23 people can awaken." Ji-Chin-Shue asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Chapter 1037. Ding Ming explained, "This is also related to the country. The Desheng Kingdom is very backward, and there are wars all year round. The people on the border have no way of making a living. Children like the Hua have to engage in high-intensity physical labor from a young age. If they can survive, their physical fitness will be especially good. This also makes it easier for them to awaken. This is similar to the nature of the dojos in the Federal Empire." Ji-Chin-Shue nodded. She understood this principle. In the end, the people of the Federal Empire lived too comfortably. Most people didn't have to worry about food and water, unlike the Desheng Kingdom. Children like the Hua had to face the threat of death since birth. People who struggled on the edge of life and death had a higher chance of awakening origin ability. Ding Ming continued, "Another reason is the sacred tree. The sacred tree's blessing is beneficial to people like us, so it's easier for everyone to awaken origin ability. However, the level of origin ability users here is much lower. First, they don't have the help of the Federation's advanced equipment and amplification products. Second, they don't have any martial arts techniques, so they take a detour in their cultivation." Ji-Chin-Shue said, "There aren't any martial arts techniques at all?" Ding Ming said, "It's not that there aren't any. Ordinary origin ability users can't come into contact with these. Martial arts techniques are mostly owned by sects and aren't taught to outsiders. The more powerful martial arts techniques are in the hands of the royal family. How can ordinary people come into contact with them?" Ji-Chin-Shue nodded and sighed. "So, the Desheng Kingdom is a few hundred years behind the Federal Empire?" Ding Ming smiled bitterly. "It's not just a few hundred years. There's a gap of over 1,000 years." While the two were talking, they unknowingly arrived at the entrance of Apricot Village. This was a small village built by the riverside. The village wasn't shabby, but it was full of thatch houses with about a dozen families. This kind of village was very common on the border. The Hua's home was a hut made of 2 thatched animal skins. Inside the hut lived a skinny and short old woman. This was De Hua's grandmother. Ding Ming swept a glance. De Hua's grandmother was also an ordinary person. She was about 60 years old. In the flourishing kingdom, this was already considered an old age with one foot in the grave. "Grandma, I'm back." De Hua was a little excited because Ji Qinshui used telekinesis to help De Hua transport 30 bundles of starweave grass. "Hello, Elder." Ding Ming took the initiative to greet her and released a little bit of healing energy. He could see that many of her organs had aged, and it was impossible to cure her. This was the natural law of the human body, but it could delay her aging. "Have a seat, please." Grandma's steps were a little unsteady. "You're not locals, are you?" Ding Ming had no choice but to lie. "We are merchants from the Devil Nation." Ji Qinshui did not look like someone from the border who came from a poor background. Coupled with a set of steel armor, it would be strange if no one was suspicious. "Oh, so you're from that side." Grandma sat on the edge of the bed. In fact, there were not many furnishings in the room. De Hua had brought in 2 straw stools from outside. "Brother, sister, please have a seat." De Hua was very respectful to Ji Qinshui. She admired Ji Qinshui's invisible healing ability. Ding Ming said, "Elder, I used to be from this place. I traveled to the 4 great kingdoms for many years. I stayed here when I was young, and it was never peaceful. Why is it peaceful now?" Grandma said, "No wonder I found you familiar. Young man, how long have you been away?" Ding Ming thought for a moment and said, "More than 20 years. Actually, this was the date he left the Shang Kingdom. It had been almost 40 years since he left the Cayenne plating." For a moment, he was very emotional. When he was sent to the Holy Grail Federation by the princess, the agreed time was 6 years. He did not expect that 23 years had passed on the day he returned. Everything had changed. He could not help but ask tentatively, "Elder, I remember that the western border was in chaos more than 20 years ago. Has peace been restored?" Grandma said, "Are you talking about the Songming Kingdom's army?" Grandpa De Hua joined the army. Unfortunately, he died on the battlefield. When Ding Ming left, the Songming Kingdom's army was attacking the Shang Kingdom. They were aiming for the holy tree. "Has the Songming Kingdom been defeated?" Ding Ming asked. Grandma shook her head and said, "How?" "The Songming Kingdom retreated on their own." Ding Ming was stunned. "They retreated on their own?" Grandma sighed and said, "I don't know what they did. The Songming Kingdom attacked from the west all the way to Tianjing. No one could stop them." "How is that possible?" Ding Ming was shocked. In his impression, among the Shang Kingdom, the Songming Kingdom, the extraterritorial Devil Kingdom, and the immortal Travel Nation, the Shang Kingdom's military strength was the strongest. It was the kingdom with the most land, the most cities, the strongest sects, and the most experts. They had soldiers like his big brother at the front lines and generals like Tianqing at the back. How could they not be able to stop the Songming Kingdom's army? Grandma said, "After the Songming Kingdom attacked Tianjing, they retreated. There have not been any battles in the past few years." Sigh. It's a pity that Grandpa De Hua did not return. Ding Ming and Ji Qinshui looked at each other. There must be something behind this. It was just that people like Grandma did not know the inside story. After chatting for a while, there was a sudden noise outside. It seemed like many people had arrived. De Hua immediately stood up and said, "I'll go and take a look." Ding Ming noticed that De Hua always had that old sickle on her waist. This habit was very similar to Big Brother Zheng Ming's. There was a huge pile of starweave grass outside the house. A group of people was actually fighting over it. Not only were there adult males among them, there were also the group of children who had tried to rob De Hua. Judging from their attire, they seemed to be villagers. Every one of them looked like they had been injected with chicken blood as they fought for the bundles of grass. Ding Ming thought that De Hua was going to stop them. Unexpectedly, De Hua pulled out her sickle and ran over without a word. Because the scene was a little chaotic, no one noticed her entrance. De Hua came behind a child and raised her sickle. Ding Ming and Zhao Yu could tell that this child was one of the children who had tried to rob De Hua, so they did not stop him. After all, ordinary people's fights were not worthy of their attention. However, they did not expect this strike to be so ruthless. The blunt and heavy sickle smashed into the boy's ribs, and there was a crisp kacha sound on the spot. It was likely that the boy's ribs were broken. Ji Chinxue clicked his tongue when he saw this. Why are these children so heavy-handed? Ding Meng said, don't be fooled by the fact that they're all children. If they can cut the starweave grass, they must be pretty strong. The boy cried out in pain and staggered forward. Dehua's movements were very smooth. She took a few steps forward and slashed a few more times. Every strike was aimed at the boy's limbs. This time, even Ding Meng frowned. After a few slashes, the boy's arm suddenly had a few ghastly long cuts. The blood was dripping and it was frightening. In some places, the white bone could be seen. The crowd was in chaos. An adult man rushed forward to protect the boy and sent Dehua flying with a slap. Dehua was not discouraged even after falling on the bundles of grass. She leaped up like a carp and raised her sickle, ready to attack again. However, this time, she was shielded by Ji Chinxue. What are you doing? Are you trying to rob her? She's still a child. The adult man looked up and narrowed his eyes. Where did such a pretty girl come from? Capture her and bring her to my house. Ji Chinxue was about to step forward, but he was stopped by Ding Meng. Let me do it this time. He was born and raised in Kaiyun plated. He knew that this kind of thing could not be resolved by arguing. Therefore, in the face of a group of villagers armed with sticks, knives, and shovels, Ding Meng just waved his hand casually. The 7 or 8 people who rushed forward were immediately sent flying. Even though Ding Meng's injuries were still very serious, this was not something an ordinary person could fight against. Strictly speaking, Ding Meng was still at the level of a star warrior. He was almost invincible in the entire Desheng kingdom. When he waved his hand, the adult man's eyes widened. Who are you? You know witchcraft? Ding Meng looked at him. Kneel or die. Choose. You want me to die? The adult man was furious. He immediately raised the shiny hatchet in his hand. Where did this little brat come from? Ask my hatchet first before you speak. He fiercely chopped down with his hatchet. The hatchet actually produced a trace of heat. He did not expect this guy to be a beginner origin ability user of the thermodynamic system. Dang! Everyone was shocked. The hatchet chopped down on Ding Meng's head, but Ding Meng was not injured at all. It felt like the hatchet had chopped down on a steel plate. Then, with a chi sound, the sharp hatchet immediately turned into a puff of smoke. The adult man was petrified. What kind of freak was this? His hatchet could kill a hungry wolf. Even if he could not kill it, he had never seen a wolf melt his hatchet, right? But this little brat in front of him actually melted his hatchet. While he was still in a daze, Ding Meng sent him flying with a kick. The adult man's knees fell on the pavement by the roadside. He could no longer stand up. His face was red with pain. You're a war reverend? He was quite knowledgeable and knew that origin ability users were at the war reverend rank. Ding Meng looked at the people around him. Everyone, throw down your weapons and put the grass back. Otherwise, I'll make all of you disappear. This time, no one dared to move. Sticks, knives, and shovels were scattered all over the ground. In a small border village like the Dashing Kingdom, the best way to express oneself was to use force to speak. Whoever had the biggest fist would have the most persuasive words. Ding Meng took 2 steps forward. Who are you? The adult man gritted his teeth and said, I'm the village chief here. Ding Meng said, since you're the village chief, why are you taking the lead to rob your own villagers? The village chief was in so much pain that beads of sweat dripped down. However, he gritted his teeth and did not say anything. Ding Meng's eyes focused slightly and transmitted a bit of healing energy to him. Stand up and talk. His shattered knees miraculously recovered. The village chief tried to move his body and stood up easily. This time, he did not dare to act rashly. He knew that the 2 strangers in front of him were iron plates and could not be easily offended. Thus, he hurriedly cupped his hands. May I know your name? Ding Meng said impatiently. Answer my question first. The village chief was stunned. Is there anything wrong with robbing people? Ding Meng was annoyed. What kind of logic is this? Chapter 1038. The village chief looked very innocent and stammered, I don't think. I did anything wrong, right? Ji Chinchue was also angry. It's fine if you don't protect your own villagers, but you even took the lead in robbing. Do you know that Hua's fingers were cut off by these children just now? The village chief smiled bitterly. These are the matters of the little brats. Ding Meng said, don't you know the rules of the border of the Shang kingdom? As long as they're not refugees, robbing, stealing, and raping people are all hanged. Did you eat a leopard's guts? The village chief spread out his hands and said, the laws have been changed long ago. There is no such thing now. This time, it was Ding Meng's turn to be stunned. The village chief's face didn't look evil, and judging from his expression, he didn't seem to be lying. It felt like fighting, killing, plundering, and so on were as normal as eating a meal. This was completely different from the border in his memory. When he was young, the border was chaotic. Unless it was a disaster victim who had nowhere to go, the poor people would not be so arbitrary and barbaric. On the contrary, the poor people had a common understanding that they would take care of each other if they could. Relatively speaking, the customs of the people at the border were very simple. Unlike now, these adults and children all had a kind of invisible hostility. Usually, it was not visible, but once they were angry, they would use their knives. Once they used their knives, they would cut off people's hands and feet. Ding Meng muttered, is there a holy tree nearby? The village chief quickly explained, yes, there is at Cayenne Town. Our apricot village doesn't have it. Ding Meng waved his hand and said, bring me there to take a look. The village chief immediately showed a difficult expression. Ding Meng said, what? Looking at you, you are still not willing? The village chief smiled bitterly. That's not it. If you want to treat the illness, the holy tree is not effective now. It is not as effective as before. Oh, Ding Meng was a little surprised. The holy tree has no protection? The village chief said, that's not it. Anyway, I can't say. I rarely go there now. After all, the journey is quite far. De Hua quickly stepped forward. Brother, sister, I'll take you there. Ji Chinchue could not help but smile. Although this child seemed stubborn and unwilling to be taken advantage of, he was actually quite smart. He knew that he and Ding Meng were not ordinary people. If they really wanted to go to Rosy Clouds Town, they could also deal with the dozens of bundles of starweave grass while they were at it. Ding Meng waved his hand. Then lead the way. Naturally, they used their telekinesis to get out of the village. De Hua ran in front. Ding Meng and Lu Li walked behind them, and dozens of bundles of hay drifted. Ding Meng, do you think there's something wrong with the sacred tree? Ji Chinchue asked. Ding Meng nodded. Yes, the sacred tree is actually the remnant energy of the holy light. The sacred tree spirit of the Shang kingdom is the healing energy. You also know that the energy of the sacred tree worships sacred and beautiful things. Therefore, those who receive the protection of the sacred tree can not only heal their injuries, but also often have their souls comforted. They are calm and kind. How can they become lunatics who fight over a disagreement? Ji Chinchue also nodded. When I heard what the village chief said just now, I also felt that it was suspicious. De Hua and the others are so young, but when they fight, they are even more ruthless than adults. They often break arms and legs. I feel that they are especially vicious. The most important thing is that they seem to think that this is normal. Ding Meng said, I know about the sacred tree in Cayenne Town. I went there in the past. If I remember correctly, that is a 100-year-old tree. De Hua's speed was not comparable to Ding Meng and Lu Li's. Therefore, when they entered the area of Cayenne Town, the sky was already dark. Ji Chinchue saw a towering tree from afar. This tree was like a mountain with many layers of mountains. It was formed by many layers of vegetation. The top of the tree was indeed shining with a faint green light. However, as a warrior of the divine light, Ji Chinchue could not sense the familiar energy fluctuation. Ding Meng stopped by the road and sighed. Sure enough, there is something wrong with the sacred tree. De Hua also turned back from the front. Brother, sister, can there be something wrong with the sacred tree? Ding Meng said, I have to ask you about this. Don't you usually feel it? De Hua frowned. I came here twice with Grandma. The first time, Grandma's leg was injured and I carried her here. However, after resting here for a day and a night, Grandma's leg did not recover. I went to the town and changed 2 decoctions before she recovered. The second time, I was injured by a knife and came here, but there was no effect. In the end, I had to buy some medicine and apply it. Anyway, both times I came to the sacred tree, I didn't feel very good. I can't tell why. Ding Meng said, "It's better to check it out personally." Ji Chinxue nodded. He focused his eyes on the top of the tree and began to scan the sacred spirit with his telekinesis. Unfortunately, although the sacred spirit was glowing, there were no singularities or divine light energy sources inside. Instead, there were 2 strange crystals embedded in it. These crystals were also very strange. They were not technological energy crystals. They constantly emitted a halo in all directions. Once one came into contact with this halo, one's mind would ripple. At this time, Dehua's eyes suddenly turned blood red. Her breathing became heavier and her heart rate rose sharply. Ji Chinxue said, "That's strange. I can't even analyze what material this is." Ding Meng explained, "That's not important. I think I understand what's going on. The sacred spirit has been tampered with and replaced with this strange crystal. Didn't you notice that this crystal can easily trigger people's negative emotions?" Ji Chinxue glanced at Dehua. Dehua's current state was a physiological characteristic that would only occur when a person was angry. Ding Meng's eyes flashed coldly. "This is not the sacred tree, but the demonic tree. It has been radiating in the Rosy Clouds town area for a long time. It's not hard to explain why people like to fight." Ji Chinxue understood. These negative emotions of humans happen to be the cultivation energy that demons like the most. It seems that your hometown has also been invaded by demons. This situation is the most beneficial thing for demons. While the 2 were still talking, they suddenly saw De Hua running madly towards the back. Ding Meng turned around and saw that the dozens of bundles of hay on the road had been set ablaze. A group of guards in military uniform and armed with padeos appeared in the fire. F*CK. F*CK me. Dehua pounced madly. This place was too far from the river, and there was no water to put out the fire. She could only take off her animal skin coat and beat the hay with all her might. However, starweave grass was the most flammable thing. Once it was lit, it was very difficult to put out. Ji Chinxue was stopped as soon as he raised his finger. Ding Meng shook his head and sighed. "It's useless. Even if you release your ice energy, you can put out the fire, but the grass is already destroyed. The town's peddlers won't accept this kind of burnt starweave grass." Seeing that the fire was getting bigger and bigger, the guards didn't help. Instead, they laughed. "Little bastard, where did you get so much starweave grass? Did you steal it? It's all stolen goods. Burn it. No one is allowed to stay in the sacred tree area. This night patrol is really unlucky. There's nothing to be gained. It's all these poor country bumpkins, you bastards." Dehua was furious. She pulled out her sword and pounced on the guards. She had already lost her mind. Bang! The leader of the guards kicked Dehua away. "Where did this refugee come from? Get out of my way." This guard was actually a war venerable. Dehua was definitely in trouble. The haystack was burned, and she couldn't win. Dehua lay on the ground and wailed. She hadn't cried when she was robbed and had her fingers cut off, but now she was crying very sadly. Ding Meng sighed. He understood the mentality of these poor children the best. "I can endure humiliation and injustice, but I definitely can't go hungry. Without starweave grass, there would be no flour. Without food, she and her grandmother would have to go hungry. Hey, you 2 strangers. Where did you come from? Why are you sneaking around like this? Get over here when you see me," the leader of the guards said. Ding Meng couldn't help but laugh. "I haven't even done anything to you yet, and you've already come knocking on my door." To be honest, Ding Meng and Ji Chinxue didn't look too good right now. The 2 of them had fought in the space-time tunnel, and almost none of their clothes were intact. With their tattered clothes, they really did look like refugees. Ding Meng walked forward and reached out to pull Dehua up. "It's okay. Not only will there be flour later, there will also be white rice." Who knows, you might even be able to get some meat back to try tonight. Upon hearing the word meat, Dehua immediately stopped crying. She raised her head and said, "Really?" Ji Chenxue also came over and smiled. "Do you think Big Brother and Big Sister are lying to you? Your Big Brother even wants to teach you how to cut grass. Where do these bastards come from? Aren't you annoying? Hurry up and get over here." The leader of the guards shouted impatiently. Ding Ming turned his head and sneered. "Looking at your attire, you should be the citizen protector of Rosy Clouds Town. As a local patrol officer, not only do you not take care of the people, you even bully the poor. Did you set the fire just now?" The leader of the guards said proudly, "This is the sacred tree area. Miscellaneous people are not allowed to stay here. Not to mention burning a few bundles of grass. Even if I burned you, no one in Rosy Clouds Town would dare to do anything to me." Ding Ming frowned and said, "The governor and the garrison lord don't care." This time, before the leader of the guard spoke, several of his subordinates began to shout. "Bumpkin, Lord Yuan is the son-in-law of the garrison lord. In Rosy Clouds Town, Lord Yuan is equivalent to the garrison lord. Do you understand?" Ding Ming said in a deep voice, "Very good. Dehua, you and Grandma will have meat to eat tonight." The leader of the guards said sternly, "Take these 3 refugees down, especially that woman." Ding Ming laughed. "Since you want to set the grass on fire, then I'll set the people on fire." Facing the 3 guards who rushed over, Ding Ming was too lazy to make a move. "Chen Shui, you deal with this scrap metal." Ji Chenxue nodded. Although she had grown up in the Empire, she had rarely experienced the hardships of these people. If this was the Empire's border, this kind of citizen protector would definitely be dealt with severely by the police. The light punishment would be crippling their origin energy, while the heavy punishment would be capital punishment. As the 3 guards rushed over, Ji Chenxue swept her leg horizontally, and the 3 guards were immediately sent flying. She hadn't used any strength, and had only swept them with normal leg strength. However, the 3 guards flew over 10 meters and heavily fell onto the stone pavement. The 3 of them landed on their knees first. Their knees were completely crippled, and they would never be able to stand up again in this lifetime. The leader of the guard's expression changed. "She's actually a tough one. Brothers, let's attack together." This time, the remaining 5 people raised their gleaming blades at the same time. They surrounded Ji Chenxue from 5 different directions. Chapter 1039. Although they were all war Reverend level origin ability users, the coordination between the 5 of them was pretty good. Their Padao attacks were quite particular. They didn't just attack blindly, but also attacked with a bit of defense. However, in Ji Chenxue's eyes, these people's movements could be described as slow-motion movies divided by 10. Once the Padaos closed in, Ji Chenxue swiped his hand, and 5 long Padaos shot into the sky. These people were still in a daze when Ji Chenxue slapped them with the back of his hand. Immediately, 4 of them were sent flying. Just like the previous 3, they all fell to their knees completely shattered. The guard leader was stunned in place. He didn't even see how Ji Chenxue had attacked. All he could see was that Ji Chenxue hadn't even moved, while his people were all sent flying, their weapons scattered all over the ground. "You guys..." The guard leader was dumbfounded. Ding Ming laughed. "Lord Yuan, where's your arrogance from earlier?" The guard leader hurriedly said, "Don't mess around. My father-in-law is the Lord Guardian." Ding Ming said, "What's your name?" Before the guard leader could answer, Dehua immediately shouted, "He's called Yuan Hu. He often collects money from the nearby villages. He doesn't even let go of copper coins. If they don't give him money, he'll beat them up. Erguzi from our village had one of his legs broken by him. Even now, we still don't have the money to treat him." Ding Ming laughed. "Looks like you've done quite a few bad things. You even scammed the poor for their money? You really have the heart to do that." Yuan Hu said nervously, "I'm warning you guys, don't mess around. I'm the citizen protector of Kaiyun Town." Ding Ming laughed. "Don't worry. If I really did mess around, you would have been turned to ashes long ago." As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Hu's armor burst into flames with a boom. The fire instantly spread to his entire body. Yuan, who directly fell to the ground and let out a miserable scream. He desperately rolled on the ground, trying to extinguish the flames on his body. However, this was not an ordinary flame, but a heat source flame. This was not something that could be extinguished by physical means. Immediately, a burning smell filled the air. Half a minute later, Yuan, whose armor was completely burned away. Not even his underpants were left. His beard, eyebrows, and hair were all gone. His entire body had been burned into charcoal. Ji Chinchue lightly waved his hand, releasing ice attribute energy. The origin flames were extinguished, and Yuan, who lay on the ground, half dead. Dingming laughed and said, "Don't play dead. Get up." Yuan, who wasn't stupid. The other party didn't intend to take his life. It was obvious that they wanted to torture him. He lay on the ground and groaned, refusing to get up. De Hua frowned. He doesn't seem to be able to get up. Ding Ming waved his hand, and the padao on the ground was sucked into his hand. Do you know the most effective way to determine if a person can get up or not? De Hua asked curiously. What is it? Ding Ming said, cut off his legs. Then he really won't be able to get up. Hearing this, Yuan, who couldn't care less about the burning pain all over his body, he immediately jumped up. I was wrong. Sir, I was really wrong. Can you let me live? Well said. Ding Ming put away his padao. Lead the way. Yuan, whose face was distorted. It was impossible to see his bitter expression. Sir, where are we going? Ding Ming said. Into the town. Rosy Clouds town wasn't far from the Sacred Tree District. It was located on the banks of the Rosy Clouds River. From afar, it looked like a small town full of lights. In the Federal Empire, this kind of town could be described as poetic and picturesque. However, in the Desheng Kingdom, this meant that it was poor and backward. There was a wall outside the town, and there was a sentry post on it. When the soldiers guarding the gate saw Yuan, who was burned black, they immediately cried out in alarm. It's Sir Yuan. He's been burned to such a state. Quickly informed the garrison lord. Yuan, who turned around and said, Sirs, we've arrived at Rosy Clouds Town. Ding Ming said, very good. Arrange for someone to send a message. Let the villagers of the 6 nearby villages enter the town. What for? Yuan, whose face was blank. Ding Ming still said the same 2 words. Lead the way. Yuan, who was even more confused. Where are we going? Ding Ming spat out 2 words. The War Preparation Granary. Yuan, whose face suddenly changed. The War Preparation Granary was the military storage of the Desheng Kingdom. Without the instructions of the higher-ups, opening the granary without permission was a capital offense. Only during wartime would the granary be opened. Even if ordinary people ate the courage of a leopard, or even the courage of a dragon or a tiger, they wouldn't dare to have any ideas about the War Preparation Granary. Ding Ming stared at him. What's wrong? Are you unwilling or afraid? Yuan, who hesitated. Ding Ming gently waved his hand. The cold light of the padao flashed, and blood splattered in the air. Yuan, who immediately cried out in pain. His left hand had been cut off at the wrist. Ding Ming said, Do you have any other questions? No. Yuan, who was in so much pain that tears fell out. I'll bring it. As soon as they entered Rosy Clouds Town, Ding Ming and the others were immediately surrounded by a large group of soldiers. However, these people didn't dare to make a move. Even a war elder like Yuan, who had turned into a bear in front of them. These soldiers also knew that if they rashly went up, they would be sending themselves to death. Ji Chinchua looked at Rosy Clouds Town. Although the Desheng Kingdom was backward, the quality of wood and stone was far better than the Federal Empire. The low-rise buildings on both sides of the town streets were of better quality than the best wood in the Norse Empire. In other words, these monastery-like houses were impervious to fire and water. The War Preparation Granary was located next to the town's garrison mansion. From afar, it looked like an oversized 5-story brown building block. The garrison mansion was actually built very luxuriously. This reminded Ding Ming of the Huading Mountain Villa where Lan Bing lived. It was very secluded and beautiful in the style of a lotus pond under the moonlight. The villagers outside were so poor that they couldn't even afford to eat, But the garrison mansion here was extravagant and luxurious. It was true that no matter how poor a temple was, it still had a rich abbot. The door of the granary was made of palm wood and had an area of about 30 square meters. Ding Ming kicked the door panel into pieces. The inside was similar to a freezer. Various shelves were neatly arranged with grain and meat raw materials. Seeing these things, De Hua's eyes immediately widened. In the eyes of the poor, these things were even more precious than money. At this moment, there was another bustling sound on the street. Another group of fully armed people arrived. The two men in the lead were dressed luxuriously and had extraordinary temperaments. At first glance, one could tell that they were the consul and the garrison mansion. "Father-in-law, I'm here. Yuan howled desperately. Someone opened the war preparation granary without permission. It seems that you haven't realized your mistake." Ding Ming laughed again and slapped Yuan Hu's mouth with his knife. This time, he used the blade to slap Yuan Hu's mouth. Although the force was small, it was still not something Yuan Hu could withstand. The two halves of Yuan Hu's lips immediately turned into sausages. Yuan Hu could no longer make any sound. "How dare you? Who are you?" A middle-aged man with a fat head and big ears wearing military uniform walked out. Ding Ming glanced at him. "You're the garrison mansion, aren't you? What has become of Rosy Cloud's town under your control? Even the protector of the people wants to rob the poor." The garrison mansion glared at him. "How dare you? How dare you speak without thinking? Take him down." A group of soldiers with halberds behind him immediately stepped forward. They looked aggressive and did not look like they were going to arrest him, but directly kill him. Ding Ming sighed. "Don't give up your life in vain. I usually don't kill people randomly. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." The garrison mansion said angrily, "Listen to my orders. Kill him on the spot." The group of soldiers immediately quickened their pace and rushed forward. Ding Ming waved his hand. Immediately, there was a chi-chi-chi sound in the air. The dozen or so soldiers who rushed forward turned into smoke on the spot. Not even a trace of smell was left in the air. Everyone was dumbfounded. What kind of unfathomable ability was this? He could directly turn people into nothingness. Previously, Yuan Hu only thought that Ding Ming relied on the ability of the beautiful woman beside him. Now that he saw that she could turn more than a dozen war venerables into smoke without even moving a finger, coupled with the severe pain from the wounds all over his body, he swayed in fear and fainted on the ground. The garrison mansion's dignified face turned into panic at this moment. You, Ding Ming sneered and said, "A local official like you should also die for making Rosy Cloud's town a mess." This time, he did not even wave his hand. The padao flew out as if it had eyes and directly pierced into the garrison mansion's chest. The garrison mansion also swayed and fell to the ground. Ding Ming's gaze fell on the consul. "It's your turn. What do you have to say?" The consul was a tall and thin man. He did not look flustered. He cupped his hands in a manner that was neither humble nor arrogant. "I am Yu Xingqiu, the official in charge of Rosy Cloud's town. Your Excellency's skills are extraordinary. May I know your name?" "Yu Xingqiu." Ding Ming's heart skipped a beat. He took the initiative to ask, "Who is Yu Xingyang to you?" Hearing this name, Yu Xingqiu was shocked. "Your Excellency is so young. Could it be that you are an old acquaintance of Mr. Yu?" Ding Ming said, "It seems that you do know him." Yu Xingqiu explained, "My surname is Yu. I am of the same lineage as Mr. Yu. I am a servant of the UMO Villa of the extraterritorial Devil Kingdom. Many years ago, I was sent by Mr. Yu to travel in the Great Flourishing Kingdom. According to seniority, I should be a servant of Mr. Yu." Ding Ming became interested. "You are a servant of the extraterritorial Devil Kingdom, but you became the garrison mansion of the Great Flourishing Kingdom?" Yu Xingqiu did not dare to hide anything. He took the initiative to explain, "Mr. Yu took us away from the villa many years ago. He said that he wanted us to come to the Great Flourishing Kingdom to find the traces of Big Brother and Miss Dingwenha. At the same time, we should inquire about the clues of the hero's knife. I was sent to Rosy Cloud's town more than 30 years ago. So that was it." Ding Ming sighed. Many past events appeared in front of his eyes. "Do you know that Mr. Yu has already fallen?" Yu Xingqiu's expression darkened. I know, Sir passed away at the banks of the celestial heaven's gate's great river. This was also something that happened 30 years ago, but I only found out 20 years ago. After that, I had no hope of returning to my country, so I slowly became a town official here. However, the power of this place is huge, and I only have a name. Ding Meng sighed and said, "Formless divine knife, #1 in the world." Unfortunately, Sai, Yu Xingqiu said, the great flourishing kingdom's royal family said that Mr. Yu colluded with the enemy and led them to invade. He was executed by the Celestial Heaven's Gate and was buried on the banks of the Celestial Heaven's Gate. Ding Meng's expression turned gloomy again. Mr. Yu is a righteous man. How could he collude with the enemy? That year, he was unfortunately poisoned in order to protect me. Then, he used the strange technique of the extraterritorial Devil Kingdom, causing his soul to be overdrawn. Finally, he fell after killing by Ping Hai and the others. Yu Xingqiu was stunned. He did not expect the truth of the matter to be like this. He once again cupped his hands and bowed deeply to Ding Meng. This bow conveyed too many meanings. Ding Meng nodded and said with a sigh, "This is also difficult for you. You have been misled for so many years. Get up and tell me about this sacred tree." Chapter 1040. Yu Xingqiu obviously knew more about the holy tree. According to his explanation, the holy tree had only become like this in the past 20 years. The holy tree and the Holy Spirit were usually able to heal injuries, but 20 years ago, the holy tree no longer had this kind of effect. On the contrary, if one stayed in the holy tree area for too long, their temperament would become strange. No matter if they were poor or disaster victims, they would often fight over small matters. Ding Meng frowned and said, 20 years ago, the Tsangming army attacked the west of the Dasheng kingdom. Could it be related to this? Yu Xingqiu explained, this is a strange thing. The Tsangming kingdom attacked all the way to Tianjing and destroyed the holy tree along the way. No one knows why they retreated when they reached Tianjing. I heard that the king personally negotiated with them before they retreated. However, after that battle, the holy tree in the kingdom seemed to have lost its effect. As for why they retreated, no one knows. Ding Meng said, it seems like it is related to that battle. Yu Xingqiu said, but there's a holy tree area in the Dasheng kingdom that is still effective. Ding Meng said, where? Yu Xingqiu quickly said, it's the Celestial Heaven's Gate where the Holy Mountain is located. The Celestial Heaven's Gate has always had a holy tree protecting the Celestial Mountain. Originally, the Celestial Heaven's Gate did not care about worldly affairs, but in recent years, they have allowed people who are infected with diseases to go through difficulties and receive the Holy Spirit's blessing at the foot of the mountain. Ding Meng muttered, it seems like sect leader Ling knows something. Since you're back, you should pay your respects to Mr. Yu. He turned and said, I'll leave this place to you. Open the granary and distribute the food to the refugees. If the higher-ups investigate, just say that I stole it. Call me Ding Meng. Yu Xingqiu quickly cowed out. Mr. Ting is Mr. Yu's old friend. Are you going to the Holy Mountain? Why don't you rest for a while and wait for me to arrange a car to send you there? Ding Meng waved his hand and said, there's no need to trouble yourself. If I want to go, it will definitely be faster than a boat. Da Hua understood. Ding Meng looked like he was about to leave. Brother, sister, aren't you guys staying? Ding Meng lowered his head and smiled. Don't worry. I'll still come back to see you when I'm free. Take good care of Grandma. As he spoke, he injected a strand of divine sense into the flower. This was the Federation's primary technique, the Blazing Star Technique, which was a 3-star technique. As for whether this child could grow up in the future, it would depend on her own luck. Before Da Hua could react, Ding Meng had already held Ji Qinxue's hand and soared in the sky under Yu Xingqiu's horrified gaze. They flew directly into the night sky and sped towards the north like a meteor. All the soldiers present looked as if they had seen a god. They put down their weapons and knelt on the ground to pray devoutly. For the ordinary people of the flourishing kingdom, people who could fly were really immortals. What was the big deal about opening a war preparation granary? They were lucky to be able to see the true appearance of such a person. Although the flourishing kingdom was vast, it could not be compared to the Federal Empire. After all, the Federal Empire was a super country formed by many galaxies, but here was a single planet. With Ding Ming and Ji Qinshue's flying speed, it would only take them a few hours to reach the Holy Mountain. In fact, the Celestial Heaven's Gate was not too far from Tianjing. Otherwise, by Ping Hai and the others would not have been able to track Yu Xingyang all the way back then. Since they had returned to the flourishing kingdom, it was time to settle the past. Every time he thought of brother Zheng Ming and Mr. Yu, Ding Ming's heart would be filled with anger. By the time they reached the Holy Mountain area, it was already the next morning. This place was still the same as before. The majestic mountain had a solemn atmosphere. The top of the mountain was as high as the clouds, and the entire mountain was shrouded in clouds all year round. At the foot of the mountain, there was a clear, meandering river. The flowing water remained unchanged all year round, as if it was quietly telling the past of the green grass by the riverside. Ding Ming stood on the grass by the riverside, silently staring at a huge rock in a daze. Ji Qinshuo could not help but ask, "Is this where Misty Yu saved you back then?" Ding Ming nodded. He recalled Yu Xingyang's last words. "Ding Ming, please do not let down everyone who has sacrificed for this hero's knife." Yu Xingyang was different from Big Brother, Zheng Ming, and Ding Wenhe. He had been searching his whole life for love, for the knife, and for fame. In the end, he realized that the so-called #1 knife in the world was just a laughable reputation. It was as insignificant as dust and could never compare to the meaning and spirit of the hero's knife. Looking at the rough rock, Ding Ming bowed deeply. "Mr. Yu, after 30 years, I, Ding Ming, have not let you down. I have finally completed my studies and returned. Please rest in peace." After leaving the riverside and heading towards the Holy Mountain, there were many shacks and woodlands along the way. Looking at the situation, there were quite a few people. It was obvious that these were refugees who had come to seek treatment. However, the Celestial Heaven's Gate had its own rules. Without permission, outsiders were not allowed to go up. It was exactly the same as the scene in his memory. There was a simple stone staircase that led straight up. Halfway up the mountain, there was a pavilion with a long plaque that was engraved with 3 golden words, Celestial Heaven's Gate. Ding Ming and Yu Xingyang walked to the gate. 2 women in Taoist robes blocked their way. "Honorable guests, please stop. The Celestial Heaven's Gate is currently rejecting all visitors. Please go down the mountain. If you have offended us in any way, please forgive us." Ding Ming clasped his hands. "Ladies, my name is Ding Ming. I am the inheritor of the formless knife Yu Xingyang and his wife, Long Yao. Many years ago, Mr. Yu had visited the gate leader to study the Ling Xian knife technique. We had an agreement long ago. My old friend has passed away. Today, I return to visit again. Please pass on my message." Hearing the words Yu Xingyang, Long Yao, and Ling Xian knife technique, the 2 women were shocked. They quickly turned around and went up the mountain. Ji Qinshuo could not help but ask, "Ding Ming, haven't you already learned the Ling Xian knife technique? You still want to go up this female sect?" Ding Ming laughed. "You don't understand. The sects in the De Sheng Kingdom are different from the Federation. In the Holy Grail Federation, as long as you have money, you can declare yourself as a sect. But in the De Sheng Kingdom, this is not possible. If you want to establish a sect in the De Sheng Kingdom, other than having your own martial arts techniques, you also need the royal family's approval. The most important thing is that the gate leader not only has to have outstanding strength, but also has to have skills that other sects do not have." Ji Qinshuo was curious. "What kind of skills?" Ding Ming said, "Every sect is different. They have different skills, so the slogans they use are also different. From what I know, there is a sect called the Magical Hand Sect in Kaiyun. The gate leader's martial arts are not very good, but his medical skills are very good. And after his acupuncture, most illnesses can be cured." Ji Qinshuo muttered, "This Celestial Heaven's Gate is known as the path to immortality. Is Ling Yuelan's gate leader really an immortal?" Ding Ming laughed. "She's definitely not an immortal. But other than her knife techniques, she's also a prophet. In the De Sheng Kingdom, prophets have a very high status. Of course, this is also thanks to the holy tree. Ji Qinshu asked curiously, can she really foresee the past and future? Dingming nodded. She really can. Didn't the princess foresee the future? The wonders of Shunguang technology are enough for us to learn. As they spoke, the two disciples quickly returned. Mr. Ting, the gate leader invites you in. At the peak of the mountain was a spacious and flat battle arena. Dozens of beautiful women in green surrounded the battle arena. All of them were staring at the path on the cliff. After Ding Ming entered the celestial heaven's gate, he could not help but be shocked. Ling Yuelon was actually sitting on a luxurious chair in the arena. It looked like she was waiting for him. The gate leader of the celestial heaven's gate did not change at all. She was dressed in green and had white hair. Her bearing was graceful and elegant, and she was imposing without being angry. Back then, when Ding Ming saw her, he could not even open his eyes. Seeing her again today, Ding Ming realized that just the aura she exuded had the foundation of a battle sage. No wonder even the royal family did not dare to provoke the celestial heaven's gate in the past. Upon seeing Ding Ming, Ling Yuelon extended her hand and greeted him. Please take a seat. Ding Ming did the same as Yu Xingyang did in the past. He directly led Ji Qinxue to the guest table on the south side and sat down. Immediately, a disciple served fragrant tea. Ling Yuelon suddenly sighed. I did a divination last night. The divination showed that there would be 2 experts arriving early this morning. I really did not expect it to be you. Ding Ming hurriedly stood up. Gate leader is righteous. This junior does not dare to call himself an expert. Ling Yuelon laughed. I've seen you before. Your name is Ding Ming. 30 years ago, you were still a child without any martial arts foundation. You followed Yu Xingyang up the mountain as a guest. I didn't expect that in a short 30 years, you would already be an expert of your generation. Ding Ming returned the greeting once again. This junior does not dare. Senior is righteous. The celestial heaven's gate has never cared about the affairs of the mortal world, but now that they have opened the celestial gate, they are gracious to the masses. This is something that I cannot compare to. Ling Yuelon could not help but raise her head and sigh. The outside world is separated by the mortal world. I cannot bear to see the desolate and chaotic world. I regret that the wind blows and the clouds slowly surround the celestial mountain. Ding Ming cupped his hands. Admirable. Ling Yuelon then said seriously, everything is fated. Back then, when Yu Xingyang came up the mountain, I could see that he did not have long to live. I did not expect that it was because of you that he fell at the foot of my sacred mountain. After he left, I could also see that Long Yao would follow him down the mountain. Similarly, she does not have long to live. As long as it is a member of my celestial gate, they do not have much time left after leaving the sacred mountain. It has been like this for generations. Ji Qinxue could only stand up. Ji Qinxue greets senior. Ling Yuelon nodded. You are here to resolve your doubts, right? Yes. Ding Ming also knew that this prophet definitely knew a lot of things like the back of her hand. Even if she was not clear, she would be able to divine it. Ling Yuelon said, in the past, the Great Wei dynasty was filled with the flames of war. However, it was actually a flourishing age. Now that there are no more wars, it is actually a chaotic world. Ding Ming frowned. Lord Secmaster, what do you mean by that? Ling Yuelon's gaze was somewhat absent-minded. Although there were wars in the past, the people could still survive by relying on the sacred spirit. However, now that the sacred spirit is almost completely extinguished, it is difficult for the people to even survive. The evil aura is too strong, and the killing intent is too strong. If it is light, there will be punches and kicks. Ding Ming's gaze flickered. Was it caused by the royal family? Ling Yuelon said, yes. Ding Ming said, was it also caused by the Tsangming army's battle 20 years ago? Ling Yuelon said, it seems that you have already figured out the reason. Chapter 1041. Savoring Ling Yuelon's words, Ding Ming could not help but fall into deep thought. Ling Yuelon smiled. This chaotic world has arrived. The heaven's chosen one should bear the responsibility. Ding Ming was a little surprised. Sovereign also knows about the heaven's chosen one? Ling Yuelon said leisurely. The Great Wei dynasty uses the holy tree as a symbol to stand on this continent. There is more than one heaven's chosen one. Doesn't my celestial heaven's gate also have the protection of the holy tree? Back then, Long Yao was the heaven's chosen one. Following you down the mountain was within my expectations. She died in battle on the western border, so it could be said that she got what she wanted. If you leave my gate today, you will also leave as the heaven's chosen one. Ding Ming said, Will I also die in the end? Ling Yuelon shook her head and said, This is not something I can predict. I can only say that I can tell you everything I know. Ding Ming said respectfully, Please speak, Sovereign. Ling Yuelon said word by word. 3 days later, in the Tian family's manor on the outskirts of Tianjing, Tianqing will hold his 135th birthday banquet. Ding Ming was shocked. Sovereign also knows about what happened back then. Ling Yuelon sighed. It's a pity that our sect does not accept male disciples. Otherwise, I would have let that brat surnamed Zheng enter the sect back then, and not let him step onto the path of no return. If he did not die, how could Yu Xingyang have been involved in this? If Yu Xingyang had not been involved in this, how could Long Yao have followed him down a mountain? Everything is a cycle of karma, a dream, a fog, a void, because my heart is moved, an illusion is born, causing me to enter a dream. Ding Ming once again savored her words and slowly cupped his hands. Thank you for telling me, Sovereign. Ling Yuelon looked at him. Are you ready to leave? Ding Ming nodded. This matter had been buried in his heart for 35 years, a past he had never wanted to look back on. But today it was time to end it. Ling Yuelon said again, You plan to leave just like that? Ding Ming asked in surprise. Sect Master, do you have any other orders? Ling Yuelon's turbid eyes suddenly shot out a ray of light. Is my celestial heaven school a place where you can come and go as you please? Ding Ming's eyes also flashed with a glimmer of brilliance. Sect Master, are you going to teach me something? I don't dare. Ling Yuelon said in a deep voice. The royal family of today is no longer the royal family of the past. If you can't even go down the sacred mountain, then I don't think you need to go to the Tian family's manor. Anyway, you will die if you go there. If you die there, you won't even have a burial place like the smelly ditch. If you die in my immortal sect, I will definitely bury you. Ding Ming's heart skipped a beat. He immediately nodded and said, Okay, please show me your moves. Only then did Ling Yuelon look around and say in a dignified voice, Everyone, step down. Dozens of disciples immediately retreated, keeping a distance of 20 meters away from the martial arts field. The purpose of this was to prevent the two from injuring the bystanders. According to the rules of the Dasheng Kingdom, Ding Ming took the initiative to walk to the center of the martial arts practice field. Ling Yuelon slowly stood up. At this moment, she no longer had that old and decrepit look on her face. Her entire body was emitting a brilliant luster, like a treasured blade that was about to be unsheathed. In fact, she had been cultivating wholeheartedly all these years, hiding her strength and biding her time. Ding Ming did not dare to underestimate her. This sect master Ling Xian's cultivation was actually close to the level of an interstellar warrior. To be honest, to be able to cultivate to this level in the Dasheng Kingdom was simply a miracle. And now that Ding Ming's injuries had not healed, he was only at the level of a beginner warrior. If they were to really fight, it was hard to say who would win. Ling Yuelon stared at Ding Ming and suddenly reached out her hand. Saber. Immediately, a disciple walked over with an exquisite tray. Lying on the tray was Ling Xian's saber. The dark green scabbard was inlaid with 7 pearls, and the resplendent brilliance had already caused the entire martial arts practice field to pale in comparison. Ling Yuelon reached out to hold the saber and carefully stared at the scabbard. Ever since Long Yao fell, this saber has not been unsheathed for more than 20 years. Today's battle, you can be proud of it. My immortal sect's treasured saber slaughters the world's ugliness, sweeping away all the bandits in the world, complimenting your hero saber. Ding Meng was filled with respect. Thank you. Ling Yuelon continued. Yu Xingyang regards you as his successor. I believe you have learned something over the years. Ding Meng said leisurely. The formless divine saber is indeed worthy of its good name. Ling Yuelon's face darkened. Where's your saber? Ding Meng was very calm. The saber is here. Ling Yuelon frowned. Where's the saber? Ding Meng said leisurely. It's everywhere. This was very similar to the battle between Yu Xingyang and Long Yao, but the answer was completely different. Ling Yuelon said, Good. It seems like your saber technique is far stronger than Yu Xingyang's. Ding Meng had already activated his origin energy. His palms pulled across the air, and a straight and bright long saber suddenly appeared in his palms. It looked like a tang saber, but in reality, it looked more like an ancient sword. Ling Yuelon gestured. Please. Ding Meng said, Please. With a chong sound, like the roar of a dragon, the saber was unsheathed. This was the first time Ji Qinxue saw the real Ling Xian saber. At this moment, the saber's body was not simply emitting light. It was practically a solid, seven-colored brilliance, comparable to the rays on a starship. Ling Yuelon's real body was also gone. In midair, a white cloud appeared like a beautiful gauze curtain. Countless grain-sized astral winds howled out of the curtain and swept towards Ding Meng like a tidal wave. Seeing Ling Xian personally make a move, Ji Qinxue realized that her foundation was more solid than any of the warriors in the Federal Empire. These ice-type astral winds had been trained to the point where they were like liquid and not just simply freezing the opponent. Just this point alone was shocking enough. Strangely, Ding Meng stood there without moving, allowing the ice-type origin energy to hit his body. Soon, his entire body was wrapped in a dark blue bubble, like a human specimen in amber. Ji Qinxue might not know what kind of saber technique this was, but the hearts of everyone present were clear. This was the first move of the Ling Xian saber technique, Cold River Ask Snow. This kind of saber technique focused on lightness, elegance, and ease. After it was displayed, it was as beautiful as a painting, dazzling the eyes of others. Just as one was stunned by this beauty, one would fall. In other words, as long as one could display it, it would be very difficult for the opponent to resist. Back then, when Yu Xingyang fought Long Yao, he knew this principle very well, so he used this stop-killing method. If you want to use it, I will make it so that you can't draw your saber. Now that they saw Ding Meng frozen into a bubble, many disciples of the Celestial Heavens sect were whispering. Almost everyone thought that Ding Meng was finished. Even Ling Yuelon was a little surprised. Do you want to die? But seeing that Ding Meng was still blinking in the bubble, Ling Yuelon couldn't help but be surprised. This was not Ding Meng taking it head-on. This was Ding Meng respecting her generation's senior, and not taking the initiative to make things difficult for her. At this moment, Ling Yuelon felt a huge sense of danger, because Ding Meng's counterattack was bound to be terrifying. Sure enough, Ding Meng flew up with the bubble, and the light sword in his hand suddenly stabbed out lightly. This was the Heavenly Sword 13 Styles. It looked very casual, but every sword was an elite killer. Ding Meng, who was flying in the air, slowly stabbed out 3 times in a row. Not only did the bubble disappear, but the light sword also produced circles of white light. Under the catalysis of the powerful heat energy, the curtain created by Ding Meng's saber disintegrated bit by bit, until it disappeared without a trace. Ling Yuelon's real body was floating in the air. Seeing that Ding Meng's ordinary sword style actually had such a strong power, Ling Yuelon was also shocked. She no longer planned to use the second or third style. She knew that these ordinary moves were useless against Ding Meng. Ling Yuelon gritted her teeth, raised her saber, and slashed towards Ding Meng's head. Ding Meng's saber actually expanded by several times in an instant, like a huge wall smashing down on Ding Meng. Ding Meng held the sword hilt with one hand, and used the tip of the sword to fiercely push upwards. Bang! The two powerful forces collided, and a large amount of energy fluctuations and water vapor immediately spread out in all directions. This was the fusion of ice and fire, the most direct collision of strength. Ling Yuelan's goal was obvious. She deliberately wanted to test Ding Meng's true strength. 10 seconds later, she knew that she was wrong. Ding Meng's light sword was still overflowing with light, and it was as steady as a rock. However, Ding Meng's saber was gradually shrinking in size. Not only was Ding Meng's heat energy endless, it was also very strong, and the aura was incomparably dense. This was impossible to achieve without hundreds of years of accumulation. However, Ding Meng was only in his early 40s. How did he cultivate such pure energy? In fact, this had something to do with Ding Meng's experience. Ding Meng was not using the divine light energy right now, but was using actual thermal energy. And this thermal energy was quickly absorbed during the 3 years on Planet Extreme Flame. This was completely different from Ling Yuelan, who had been building a car behind closed doors in the Sacred Mountain for so many years. Seeing that Ling Xian's saber was about to be beaten back to its original form, Ling Yuelan once again flew to a higher place. A dazzling brilliance shot straight into the sky. In the sky, numerous human figures appeared and disappeared, and a woman wearing a pure white robe and a pure white veil shuttled through the curtain of white fog. Her figure was graceful, and her charm was boundless, as if a fairy had descended to the mortal world. Her bearing was different, and her charm was endless. Numerous immortal lights flowed among her. This scene was like a fairy descending to the mortal world, intoxicating. This was the strongest move of the saber technique, Mysterious Lady of the 9 Heavens. Long Yao had used this move before, and Ding Meng had also used it during the Fengyan Great Assembly. Now that Ling Yuelan was using it personally, it was even more shocking. This fairy mirror almost completely covered the entire arena. Even Ji Qinxue felt a piercing pain in his eyes. The other disciples of the Celestial Heaven's Gate retreated far away, and no one could open their eyes. However, Ding Meng did not respond. He somersaulted in the air and landed steadily. The light sword also retracted into his palm. He looked very calm, as if he did not care about the beautiful scene in the sky at all. When he landed, all the fairy mirror images miraculously disappeared. Ling Yuelan's real body reappeared. She also slowly landed in the center of the arena. Ding Meng lowered his head and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Senior, for your guidance." Ling Yuelan stared at him. "Why didn't you counterattack?" Ding Meng smiled. "Senior's strength is extraordinary. I admit defeat." Ling Yuelan stared at him for a long time and suddenly sighed. "Yu Xingyang and Long Yao are too far away from you." She paused for a moment and continued to sigh. "I'm also too far away from you." When these words came out, the surrounding people all had expressions of disbelief. The sect leader actually admitted defeat and lowered his head. This was simply unbelievable. Chapter 1042. Ding Meng stared at Ling Yuelan. "Sect leader, why do you say that?" Ling Yuelan said meaningfully, "Being able to send it out is not an ability. Being able to take it back is the way of the king." Others might not understand these words, but Ding Meng definitely understood. Just now, when Ling Yuelan used the move of the Mysterious Lady of the 9 Heavens, the force field and mirror image clearly covered the entire area. Not only was Ding Meng able to withstand it, but he also calmly landed in the center of the field. What did this mean? It meant that Ding Meng was not afraid of her move at all. It was not that he did not counterattack, but that he could break her attack at any time. Ding Meng did not counterattack to save Ling Yuelan's face. Ling Yuelan also saw this point, so she also retracted her move and descended. The so-called freely retracted and released was the true pinnacle of martial arts. Go. No matter who you're going to deal with this time, it will be difficult for you to find an opponent in the Desheng Kingdom. Ling Yuelan's words were like a curse, causing one's confidence to increase greatly. However, Ling Yuelan continued, "But on this continent, you still cannot let your guard down. This world is so big, and there are many strange people that you cannot see with your eyes. She waved her hand to the side, and a disciple walked up with another tray. This time, what laid on the tray was not a weapon, but an exquisite necklace. The pendant of the necklace was the small and unique Ling Xian blade pendant. Ling Yuelon gently picked up the necklace and looked at Ding Ming with a strange gaze. "Do you find it familiar?" Ding Ming nodded. This pendant was clearly a mini version of Ling Xian blade, and it also looked like a hero's knife. Ling Yuelon seemed to know what he was thinking and explained with a serious expression. "This is the real hero's knife." "Huh?" Ding Ming and Ji Qinxue were shocked at the same time. Ling Yuelon's gaze fell into the distance, as if she was recalling the past. "Do you know how the celestial heaven's gate came about?" Ding Ming could only shake his head. Ling Yuelon said, "When I was young, I traveled around the various countries and accidentally met a nameless senior in the extraterritorial Devil Kingdom. He passed down a shocking ability to me and instructed me to give this item to the person who is truly chosen by the heavens in the future." Ding Ming reacted. "This is the celestial seal of the celestial heaven's gate?" Ling Yuelon nodded her head and said, "Later on, I founded the celestial sect. Although my goal was to seek the Tao of immortality, in reality, it was to find that senior who had been missing for a long time. I have a feeling that that senior is not someone from our world. He came from a different time and space, or perhaps he's a legendary god. But unfortunately, the immortal seal was lost many years ago, and after that, Yu Xingyang kept his promise of 20 years and found the immortal seal." Ding Ming listened quietly. Ling Yuelon continued. "During the 100 years when the immortal seal was lost, many disciples left the celestial gate to search everywhere. They all carried the exact same Ling Xian knife. These knives were all made of dark gold materials. Our celestial gate had always been following the instructions of that senior, to kill all the evil in the world, to wipe out all the bandits in the world. Unfortunately, none of the 30 disciples returned. They might have all fallen on the way to seek the Tao, and these knives were scattered in the surrounding countries." Ding Ming suddenly felt his heart beating faster. Ling Yuelon continued. "Until a few decades ago at the martial arts symposium, someone used the Ling Xian knife to defeat Yu Xingyang in one move. Only then did the story of the hero's knife spread. In these years, I gradually found out about your matters, your so-called big brother, your so-called inheritance, your so-called spirit. I do not dare to call myself the Celestial Gate, but the imitation knife left behind one after another in your hands. It did not disgrace the senior's instructions." Ding Ming let out a long sigh. It turned out that the so-called spirit and inheritance were traceable. They all came from a distant place. Ling Yuelon once again revealed a solemn and pious expression. "The inheritors of the hero's knife are Hao Ran, Huzi, Dummy, Erlong, Bai Cheng, Ling Yuqiang, Lu Shiji, Wu Meinyang, Tian Mingyu, Tsang Cheng, Xiao Yu, Jiang Li, Ding Wenhe, Zheng Ming, and Ding Ming." This was the first time Ding Ming had heard the complete names of the inheritors. For a moment, his chest surged with heat, the blood in his body boiling. It was these names that created the legend of this knife, giving this knife a soul. Only now did he know that the first big brother's name was Hao Ran. The little girl's name was Jiang Li. She was the 12th inheritor. Ding Wenhe was the 13th, Zheng Ming was the 14th, and Ding Ming was the 15th. "Thank you for telling me. Sect leader, I have remembered their names by heart." Ding Ming said gratefully, "The inheritance of the hero's knife is still continuing. The 16th inheritor Yu Xingyang, the 17th inheritor Meng Yin, the 18th inheritor died." Ling Yuelon handed the necklace to Ding Ming. "Now, the knife is returned to its rightful owner." Ding Ming was shocked. "Why?" Ling Yuelon said seriously, "The divination and the aura." Ding Ming did not understand. Ling Yuelon explained, "Last night, the divination said that there would be guests from the immortal sect today. Until I saw the two of you, I realized that the aura on your bodies was exactly the same as that of that senior. I knew that the true inheritor of the knife had arrived. I would not be able to comprehend this immortal seal in my lifetime. I think I do not have that opportunity. Perhaps it is fate that I am giving it to you. Take it to the capital city It will give you the answer you seek. Ding Meng received it solemnly. The moment the necklace was in his hands, his face revealed a look of surprise. Ji Qinxue also transmitted a message. This is actually a divine light necklace. Ding Meng also sensed that this was indeed a divine light necklace, but it was not the one that Ji Qinxue had, which meant that this was not a relic left behind by General Xingluan. Ling Yuelon did not have the aura of the divine light on her body, so naturally it could not be detected. But why would there be such a necklace in the flourishing kingdom? Was it left behind by a certain senior Mao Xing? Perhaps no one would know these questions. But fate was so mysterious. The chosen one, the holy tree, holy spirit, the divine light martial artist, Mao Xing's relic. These were all destined from the start by the hero's knife. Ding Meng handed the necklace to Ji Qinxue, bowed deeply to Ling Yuelon, and then led Ji Qinxue towards the gate. Only when the figures of the two had completely disappeared from the mountain path did Ling Yuelon once again sit back on the large chair, returning to her old and doddering appearance. Lord Sect Leader, is it really appropriate to hand the divine seal to them? A disciple beside her asked. Ling Yuelon sighed. If even they're unable to deal with the predicament of the flourishing kingdom, then perhaps no one will be able to deal with it. I hope that in the birthday banquet 3 days later, they will not repeat the tragedy of that year. The kingdom's capital, Tianjing City, was located in the center of the flourishing kingdom's territory. Before entering Tianjing City, one had to pass through a green and clear river in the outskirts. The river was embedded in a lush grassland. At the end of the grassland was a distant mountain covered in pure white snow. The heaven and earth were shrouded in cold fog. The flourishing kingdom rarely had hot summers, and most of them alternated between spring and winter. Ding Meng and Ji Qinxue walked all the way to the outskirts. Gazing at the clear and winding river, Ding Meng's expression sank into contemplation. Back then, it was at this place that he had made the raft, placed the corpses of Big Brother Zheng Ming and Aunt Xiao on it, and personally ignited the spiritual raft, allowing their souls to be comforted. Almost 40 years had passed, yet this place hadn't changed at all. Ding Meng suddenly stopped on a grassland. Ji Qinxue turned his head to look. In the forest beside him, there were 5 or 6 simple and crude farmhouses. In the courtyard of one of the farmhouses, a young girl was currently sitting on a straw stool. In front of her was a large wooden basin, and inside it were soaked coarse clothes. The young girl tidied up her hair that had fallen down and continued to wash the clothes in the basin. In such cold weather, her beautiful face had already turned purple from the cold. However, looking at her expression, there wasn't the slightest bit of impatience or pain. Her eyes were always suffused with a kind of radiance. It was the radiance of hope, the yearning for the beautiful days in the future. This was originally a very simple and beautiful picture, but Ji Qinxue sighed because he found that the little girl had no legs. She was a disabled person. Ding Meng was entranced by the scene and couldn't help murmuring, "Back then, Big Brother Zheng Ming and I lived here. I didn't expect this farmhouse to still be there. It seems to have been renovated." Ji Qinxue said, "So many years have passed, it will definitely be repaired." Ding Meng said, "Do you think she looks like Miss Xiao?" When he asked this, Ji Qinxue also felt it was very similar. Back then, Aunt Xiao was a farmer here. She was deaf and mute. She relied on washing other people's clothes in exchange for a meager income to survive. Unfortunately, her humble life was broken by a sudden disaster. Suddenly, hearty laughter sounded at the entrance of the compound. Aaron I and his back. Look at what good thing and hunted this time. Ding Meng turned his head and saw a young farmer boy running in excitedly. He was wearing animal skin clothes, a black sickle on his waist, and a dead mottled leopard on his shoulder. This boy's image was almost the same as Zheng Ming's in the past. He was sunny, enthusiastic, and full of vitality. There was always a bright smile on his face. Aaron I raised her head in surprise and looked at the big leopard the teenager hunted. "Big Brother Ming, how did you hunt it?" The teenager grinned and said, "An in 6th uncle squatted on the mountain for 2 nights and finally caught it." Air and I, tomorrow, and we'll carry it to the city to sell. You will have a new cotton padded jacket. We can eat egg fried rice for the new year. Air and I clapped her hands and smiled. Big brother Ming, that's great. You're the most capable. The teenager smiled even more honestly. In 2 days, we will go to the top of the mountain and squat for a few nights. If we are lucky enough to catch a magic spot beast, we can all have a good new year. Maybe there will be meat to eat. A blush appeared on Ernie's face. Maybe we can live in the city in the future. Ha ha! Yes, yes, yes. Let's go live in the city. The courtyard was filled with cheers and laughter. Ji Chinshua sighed inwardly as she listened to the conversation. She did not expect that egg fried rice was such a luxury for these poor people. The disparity between the rich and the poor in the Shang kingdom was truly unimaginable. Looking back again, Ji Chinshue found that Ding Meng's eyes were red. There was a faint flash in his eyes. She understood Ding Meng's mood. These two children were clearly the incarnations of Zheng Ming and Xiao Gu. Perhaps they had reincarnated and returned here. Ding Meng, shall we go in? Ji Chinshue suggested. Ding Meng shook her head with reddened eyes. No, let's not disturb their lives. To them, it's already a blessing to be able to live such a life without being disturbed. Chinshue, let's go and do what we should do. That's how we protect them. Ji Chinshue nodded and turned to look at the white snow on the distant mountain. The Tian family's manor was on the other side of the mountain. Chapter 1043. It was a snowy night, and there was also a bonfire. The bright light from the fire illuminated everyone's faces, and everyone's faces were brimming with joyous and festive smiles. Tian Qing sat on the master chair in the middle of the courtyard of his private manor, looking at the bustling guests in the courtyard as he fell into deep thought. Today was his 135th birthday, but he didn't feel happy. This kind of birthday banquet had to be held once every 5 years, and to be honest, he was already a little tired of it. He had been in the military all his life, experienced countless life and death battles, and enjoyed all the glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. With his current status, it was very difficult for anything to pique his interest. More than 30 years ago, he had already resigned from his position as the kingdom's great general. However, war had arisen again, and the Songming nation's army was pressing on the border, so he had to put on his armor and go into battle again. Unfortunately, he had been defeated on the front lines that time, and had been utterly defeated, retreating all the way to Tianjing. Tianjing was the kingdom's capital, and retreating here meant that there was no place to retreat, and he couldn't afford to lose. He had gathered the last of his strength to counterattack, and finally stopped the Songming nation's army outside the city. In the end, the king came forward to negotiate, and the Songming nation's army withdrew. After this battle, the king was bedridden for many years, and the kingdom's previous head of law enforcement, Jiao Gu, was in charge of all government affairs. Fortunately, there were no more wars in these years, and, as the great general, Tian Qing was happy to be idle, staying at home all day. Being idle didn't mean that he didn't have any worries. His biggest worry over these years was his third son, Tian. This lecher's biggest problem was that he had raped a peasant girl in the suburbs 30 years ago. This was originally a small matter, but it caused a series of negative effects. His old rival, Yu Xingyang, and his loyal subordinate, Bai Pinghai, were buried under the celestial heaven's gates, sacred mountain. The death of two close friends didn't sound the alarm for Tian Yi, but instead made his third son go from bad to worse, doing whatever he wanted without restraint. The number of girls he had harmed over the years was uncountable, and Tian Qing was too lazy to care. He couldn't care less, and he was very disappointed in his son. You can play with women if you want, but there's one condition: you can't kill anyone. While it was true that Skywings did not commit any murders, their reputation was already rotten in the kingdom. Fortunately, the various organizations and sects were all friends and students of Sky Blue, and many heartless matters were forcibly suppressed by these people. Sky Blue did not want to disregard these friends of his, so he turned a blind eye and let it pass. In any case, he was a great general with great authority, so who would not want to live long enough to come knocking on his door and denounce him? It was precisely because of this that the peasant boy who came to question him more than 30 years ago had left a deep impression on him. This impression was not because of the boy's persistence and integrity. In the eyes of people at the peak of power like them, integrity was just a word that could only appear in books and would never appear in reality. Whoever took it seriously was an idiot who couldn't be more stupid. How could there be real justice in this world? The so-called deep impression didn't appear in reality, but in his dreams. Many nights, he would be frightened awake by nightmares. The murdered farmer boy and the suicidal farmer girl had turned into ferocious ghosts, roaring at him in the most vicious voice. "We will come back one day. I don't want you to die. I want all of you to suffer a fate worse than death." This nightmare had troubled him for many years, but he didn't dare to say it out loud, and he couldn't say it out loud. The valiant General Tianqing hadn't even been afraid of the Songming army, so how could he be afraid of a little fake dream? But the dream was so real, and it kept appearing, so it was inevitable that people would be suspicious. Especially tonight, he felt uneasy, as if something big was about to happen. This feeling grew stronger and stronger, and it had never appeared at any of his previous birthday parties. If the first two annoyances had disturbed him, the last was a happy annoyance. His eldest son had died on the battlefield many years ago, his second son's whereabouts were unknown, and his third son was a complete wastrel. After discussing it with his wife, Tianqing decided to have another child, which would be his fourth. The fourth child was born after the war in Songming country. It was a girl named Tianju. Tianju had been doted on since she was born, because she was the only pearl in the Tian family. Because of the previous three sons, Tianqing paid special attention to Tianju's growth, and Tianju didn't disappoint her parents. This proud daughter of the heavens had extraordinary talent, and she was proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, wine, and tea. She was proficient in all kinds of martial arts, and what was even rarer was that she had awakened her origin energy at the age of 5. Now, at the age of 34, she was already an advanced combat master and was about to enter the ranks of the warlords. It must be known that in the Shang Kingdom, warlord-level origin energy experts were as high as generals, and low-level origin energy experts were sitting in sections. How many people couldn't reach this height in their entire lives? Tianju was still young, and she still had a long way to go. It could be said that her future was limitless. Tianju herself was slender and elegant, and her beauty was astonishing. In addition, at this age, it was the best time to talk about marriage. However, Tianqing was very distressed. Zhuge was too outstanding, and in the entire Desheng dynasty, there was almost no young talent worthy of her. This made him, as a father, anxious and expectant. Where exactly was his future son-in-law? At this moment, the banquet in the courtyard was halfway through. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, the royal dancers in the distant pavilion sang and danced, celebrating the birthday party. A bonfire was lit on the lawn by the lake, and the fireworks blossomed in the snowy night sky, creating colorful and gorgeous words. Congratulations to great General Tianqing for your good fortune and a long life. Seeing these resplendent fireworks, many of the people present cheered. Tianqing, however, was somewhat stunned. The same fireworks and the same words had appeared countless times. He had already become a bit bored of watching them, and he no longer had the gratification and excitement he had at the beginning. Just as he was lost in thought, another bunch of fireworks rose up, and a row of colorful words blossomed in the night sky. Delayed justice is not justice, but a nightmare. Seeing these words, the originally joyous crowd suddenly quieted down. Everyone turned their heads in surprise. How could there be such congratulatory fireworks at Great General Tian's birthday party? Was there a mistake? Tianqing frowned and turned his head to look at the housekeeper to the side. The housekeeper broke out in a cold sweat from his gaze, and he hurriedly explained, "General, it might be that those fireworks craftsmen made a mistake." Even if they made a mistake, It was impossible for them to make a mistake at Tianqing's birthday party, unless they didn't want to live anymore. Although the housekeeper's words were tactful, Tianqing also knew that it was Tian Yi who had arranged the fireworks over the years. That good-for-nothing thing only knew how to find flowers and visit willows, and he liked these kind of tricks. If there was a mistake, it would be Tian Yi's fault. "Where is Yi now?" Tianqing asked indifferently. The housekeeper answered very carefully. "Young master, Yi is currently in the dance room in the backyard." Tianqing frowned again. Tian Yi was clearly fooling around with the dancers of the royal dance troupe. The royal dance troupe had almost become Tian Yi's harem in recent years. "And Zhu Tianqing asked again. The housekeeper replied, "Young miss is still in the training room. She'll be out soon." Tianqing nodded in satisfaction. Tianzhu had always made him satisfied and reassured. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the gate of the manor. A group of guards nervously retreated with weapons in their hands. It seemed that someone had barged in from outside. The crowd fell silent again. How many years had it been since the Tian family's courtyard had been peaceful? Why would someone dare to barge in this time? Tianqing could not help but raise his head. He saw a man and a woman walking side by side. Both of them were very young, and the man was dressed shabbily. He was definitely not from some famous sect, but the man's temperament was extraordinary. His expression was calm, and he walked in leisurely, as if he was strolling in his own backyard. As for the girl, she was dressed in ordinary, coarse clothing, and with a single look, one could tell that she was a peasant girl. However, this peasant girl had a country-toppling beauty, and as soon as she walked in, many of the men's eyes were glued to her, and even their breathing stopped. In the eyes of many, this peasant girl's looks were comparable to Miss Tianzhu, perhaps even far superior. This man and woman were definitely not ordinary people. Tianqing instantly came to this conclusion. For some reason, he felt that these two young people were very familiar. He was not the only one who thought so. Everyone else present came to the same conclusion. Thus, someone stepped forward to ask, "Who dares to barge into Great General Tian's residence? Don't you know that tonight is Great General Tian's birthday banquet?" The one who stepped forward was a soldier in martial attire. He did not look young, but he had a handsome white face. Ding Meng laughed. "Who are you?" The soldier immediately revealed a proud expression. "General Tianqing. I am Zhan Feng, the vanguard general of the Flying Horse Tribe's Rapid March Army." Ding Meng thought for a moment. "Who are you to Zhan Long and Zhan Yi?" Zhan Feng was surprised. "You know my father and uncle?" Ding Meng nodded his head. "So you are Zhan Long's son. Very good." Zhan Long was the murderer who killed Zheng Ming at the birthday banquet, and Zhan Yi was Zhan Long's elder brother. These two people had long been killed by Yu Xingyang at the foot of Celestial Heaven's Gate. Seeing Ding Meng's indifferent expression, Zhan Feng was a little uneasy. "Who are you?" Ding Meng swept his gaze across the courtyard. Everyone present was a hero from all walks of life, the royal family and sections. He said solemnly, "My name is Zheng Ming." Ji Chenxue also said, "My name is Qiao Gu." Many people stared with their eyes wide open. Were these two crazy people? A nameless pawn dared to announce his name? However, a small number of people's expressions changed. Everyone thought of something at the same time. What happened 30 years ago today was originally a trivial matter, but now that the dead had come back to life, could it be that the vengeful spirits had returned to take their lives? Tianqing's eyelids twitched. He finally knew why he had such an uneasy premonition tonight. The remnants of the past had not been eradicated, and now the trouble had come. But when he looked at the other party, he realized that Ding Meng and Zhan Feng only had the aura of two primary warriors. This was nothing to be afraid of. Unfortunately, Zhan Feng did not know this. He was still aggressively asking, "The two of you trespassed into General Tian's residence without notifying, and even mentioned your late father during such a joyous birthday banquet. Do you know your crime?" Ji Chenxue couldn't help but laugh. "Are you going to say that we should be lenient on account of your young age and the fact that this is your first offense?" Only then can we show General Tion's generosity and benevolence. You. Jean Feng rolled his eyes at the rebuke. A wave of anger immediately rushed to his head. He could not help but say angrily, "Are you deliberately causing trouble?" Ji Qinxue smiled like a flower. "You are wrong. We are not here to cause trouble." Jean Feng let out a sigh of relief. Dealing with Ji Qinxue was like this. You knew that she did not come with good intentions, but when you saw her beautiful smile, it was easy to feel hostility. Chapter 1044. Jean Feng didn't even have time to let out a sigh of relief before Ji Qinxue laughed again. "We didn't come here to cause trouble. We came here to collect a debt." "Collect a debt?" Jean Feng stared blankly. Collect what debt? In his mind, it was possible that the Tian family's birthday banquet still had some goods that hadn't been paid for. As a result, these two ignorant youngsters came to the manor to ask for money. Jean Feng couldn't help but sneer. To be able to make the Tian family owe you a bit of money, that's the good fortune of several lifetimes. Why aren't you leaving yet? Ji Qinxue was still laughing. You're wrong again. Some debts can't be repaid with money. When these words were said, not only was Jean Feng stunned, everyone's expression changed. If some debts couldn't be repaid with money, then what could be repaid with? Without a doubt, it was blood and human lives. A debt of blood must be paid with blood. You guys are quite daring. Jean Feng flew into a rage, reaching out a hand to grab Ji Qinxue. He was also a combat master, and this claw had been bitterly trained for at least 20 years. There was also heat origin energy attached to it, not to mention a beginner warrior not being able to dodge. Even if they could, they would be sent flying by the aftershocks. Pung! Everyone present heard the sound of the impact, but the one who was sent flying wasn't Ji Qinxue, but rather Jean Feng himself. It was as if he had crashed into an invisible wall of sponge, and he was sent flying on the spot. His body fell straight into the banquet hall in the courtyard, knocking over 2 or 3 large round tables on the spot. The wine cups and plates were shattered into pieces. These guests were worthy of being called heroes and nobles from various places. They actually didn't panic, and they all stood up one after another to look at Ji Qinxue with sympathetic eyes. Everyone thought that the result of this peasant girl might not be death. With her appearance, she would definitely become some big shot's plaything or even be ravaged to death by countless men. As soon as Jean Feng was sent flying, another person stepped forward from the crowd. This person was refined, and he was actually wearing the official robes of the Great Wei dynasty. This girl, today, is Old Master Tian's big day. So many heroes from various sects are gathered at this birthday banquet. It's one thing for you to forcefully barge in, and the Old Master didn't make a fuss about it. But what do you mean by this? Are you trying to stir up trouble? This was exactly the same as Zheng Ming's experience back then. If you can't beat him in a fight, you'll be punished first. However, Ding Ming was not Zheng Ming. Ji Qinxue had her own unique way of handling things. She suddenly smiled at the man and said, "Judging from your attire, you must be a 4th-ranked official. May I know your name?" Not many men could resist her smile. The other party was dazed on the spot. After a moment, he cupped his hands and said, "I don't deserve your name. I am Bai Longfei." Ding Ming suddenly asked, "How are Bai Ping Hai and Bai Ling related to you?" Bai Longfei was also a little surprised. "That's my late father and sister. Do you know them as well?" "Very good." Ding Ming's reply was only 2 words. Bai Longfei could not figure out the other party's intentions. At this moment, Tian Qing finally stood up and revealed a gentle smile. He urged his origin energy and said, "Since you're here, you're my guests. My 2 little friends, please take a seat. I can see that the 2 of you are travel-worn and possess extraordinary skills. I presume that the 2 of you are not from Maida, Sheng Kingdom?" He still had a discerning eye. He could see that Ji Qinxue's move was beyond the scope of an origin ability master. Moreover, Ji Qinxue's actions were clearly led by Ding Ming. Ding Ming was definitely even more extraordinary. Of course, this was also his old trick. He would not make a move because of excessive words, because he still did not know the details of these two people. Whether it was strength or identity, only by understanding these two things would he be able to take the right medicine to treat the problem. However, it still remained the same. Ding Ming was not Zheng Ming. He would not fall into this trap. Back then, he had collected Zheng Ming's corpse here and returned here today. Over the years, what kind of people's hearts were unfathomable and treacherous? Ding Ming had seen it all. There's no need to sit. If you knew my intentions, I reckon that you wouldn't be in the mood to invite me to a seat. Ding Ming replied unhurriedly. Tianqing narrowed his eyes. I wonder why this little friend has graced my banquet with your presence? Ding Ming stared at him and said word by word, I'm here for your son. Tianqing frowned. Could it be that this little friend knows you? Ding Ming said, I don't know him. Tianqing said, then why is this little friend looking for er? Ding Ming's mouth revealed a cold smile. Do you still remember today, 35 years ago? Right here, a young man named Zheng Ming and a young woman named Xiao Gu lost their lives. Tianqing's heart sank. As expected, it was the remnants of that young man. Today, they finally came to find him. Tianqing sighed. I'm old. I'm so old that I can't remember many things clearly. Little friend, if there's any misunderstanding, why don't you stay for a drink? Ding Ming stared at him like a tiger watching its prey. It doesn't matter whether you're old or not. As long as I'm not old, it's fine. There's no misunderstanding between us. Even if there is, there's no need to drink to resolve it. These words were said rather impolitely. All the guests present did not dare to breathe loudly. For many years, no one dared to speak to General Tian in such an aggressive tone. Even the king did not dare to do so. How dare you? Don't be rude. The old butler shouted. How dare you speak nonsense in front of General Tian? I'm afraid you don't care about the kingdom's laws. How should you be punished? Tianqing turned his head and waved his hand, indicating for the butler to stop talking. Of course, after one person played the role of the good cop, another person would jump out to play the role of the good cop. Bai Longfei jumped out again and said, Friend, did you come to General Tian's birthday banquet because of the old matter from 35 years ago? On this day, 35 years ago, there was indeed a brother of Zheng Ming and a lady called Xiao Gu who came here. Unfortunately, they have already passed away. That matter has already involved my Bai family and the Zhan family. He paused and turned his head to look at Zhan Feng with a complicated gaze. His tone was very sad. Since that incident, my father and sister have already lost their lives at the foot of the Celestial Heaven's Gates, Sacred Mountain. Brother Feng's father and uncle were buried in the Celestial Heaven's Gates, Great River. I don't know what relationship you have with that Zheng Ming, and I don't know what grudges you have with General Tian. I only want to say something fair. When people die, whether there's gratitude or resentment, everything has already dissipated with the wind. His words seemed to make some sense on the surface. The Dasheng Kingdom and the Federal Empire were similar. They both agreed that the dead were the most important. The relevant people were already dead, and everything was buried. What was the point of not letting go of the past? Therefore, all the guests present were nodding, especially when they saw Zhan Feng lowering his head in sadness. Everyone felt sympathy for him. As for how Zheng Ming's Aunt Xiao died so miserably, most people didn't see it, and they couldn't imagine it, so there was no need to talk about sympathy. Ding Ming stared at Bai Longfei for a long time before he opened his mouth and said with a smile, You are indeed Bai Pinghai's son. You didn't learn anything else well, but you learned your father's way of inverting black and white to perfection. Friend, you are treating me as an outsider, but I don't blame you. I think you are Zheng Ming's friend. His old friend has already passed away, and it is sad to see this scene. I can understand you. When he said these words, Bai Longfei's expression was serious and sincere, as if he was persuading a good friend of the same path. However, there was an imperceptible look of pride in his eyes, as if to say, So what if I invert black and white? This courtyard is full of General Tian's friends, relatives, and subordinates. Do you have the right to bring up old scores? Do you have the right? Will they believe you? Even if they believe you, what can you do? For a moment, All the guests in the hall whispered. It was clear that everyone was more inclined to buy Long Fei's words. Tianqing also smiled and said, "My two young friends have come from afar. If you don't mind, please take a seat and allow me to do my part as a host." Tianqing is not good at expressing gratitude, but if the two of you need anything as long as it is within my power, I will not refuse. He was clearly trying to make a big issue small, and a small issue nothing. In the end, he had the attitude of dismissing this little interlude and dispute into nothingness. Who would have thought that Ding Meng would laugh again? This time, it was a strange laugh. "Who told you that I'm here for the matter of 35 years ago? I already said that I'm here for the Skywings." Bai Longfei could not help but frown. Wasn't this just being unreasonable? However, he still patiently asked, "Then why did you come?" Ding Meng glanced at him. "Judging from your fourth-rank official robes, you should be working in the Ministry of Justice, so you must have a good understanding of the kingdom's criminal laws. Let me ask you this. What are the punishments for the crime of lust in the kingdom's criminal laws?" There was no need to ask. Everyone present knew this, but Bai Longfei still answered, "The crime of lust is one of the 3 major crimes of the Great Wei dynasty. Those who rape women will be beaten in public in light of the punishment, and those who rape women and young women will be paraded through the streets and will be castrated. After castrating, they will be punished with flogging and finally beheaded in public, their heads hung over the top of the city as a warning." Ding Meng nodded. "Very good. It seems that you didn't become an official for nothing. You're very familiar with it." Bai Longfei did not reply. He was waiting for Ding Meng to continue. He had already guessed what Ding Meng was going to say next. Ding Meng sternly said, "Do you know that Heaven's Wings has committed the crime of lust?" Bai Longfei immediately showed a disdainful expression. "Did you think that others would believe you when you said such things at this time and place?" In truth, he himself knew that Heaven's Wings had committed quite a few crimes like this. But so what? Could a peasant youth like you convict the son of great General Tian? Even I, a deacon of the Ministry of Justice, don't dare to discuss this matter, but you're great. Did you eat a leopard's gall? Ding Meng seemed to know what he was thinking. He opened his mouth again. In truth, everyone here knows what kind of moral character the young master of the Tian family has. If he really did humiliate a country girl with no background, then so be it. Even if the situation is true, everyone won't say anything out of respect for great General Tian. However, the person that young Master Heaven's Wings has humiliated this time is no ordinary girl. That's not something that he can just pull up his pants and deny. This girl's background is very great, and I'm afraid that even the Tian family won't be able to bear it. All the guests once again whispered to each other. What kind of girl was this? Could she be the princess of the Devil Kingdom? If that was the case, then it was indeed very troublesome. This was no longer a simple matter of crime. Instead, it had been raised to the level of national politics. If it was not handled well, then there would be a war. As long as it involved war, then there was no small matter. Chapter 1045. The purple-faced old man's expression became serious. Great General Tian's private territory is a private matter, so it's best for outsiders not to wander around. If it involves General Tian's family matters, it's best for him to resolve them himself. The implication was that he wanted to cover up this scandal. Even if this kind of scandal really happened, it absolutely could not be spread. Ding Meng put away his smile. "I asked for your name, but you didn't answer my question. Do you want to die?" The purple-faced old man shouted angrily, "Little bastard, get out of here. Otherwise, don't blame this old master for taking action against the young man." Ding Meng waved his hand, and a shiny and sharp cookery blade appeared in his hand. The purple-faced old man was stunned. "What? You think you can fight against me? Do you know who I am?" To the side, Bai Longfei was frightened. "Friend, this is Misty Mountain Sect's sect master, Ziwu Ji. Senior Z, please don't act recklessly." Seemingly reminding Ding Meng, he was actually looking forward to Ding Meng taking the initiative to court death. In his eyes, Ziwu Ji was a sect master of one of the top great sects with great strength. If a young man like Ding Meng were to take action, he would undoubtedly die. In the end, Ziwu Ji's cultivation was simply too low. He couldn't even see Tianqing taking action against Ding Meng just now. If Tianqing couldn't do anything to Ding Meng, then there was no need to mention second-rate trash like Ziwu Ji and Qingwu Ji. Ding Meng turned to Ziwu Ji and smiled. It seems that Tianqing has a good relationship with you. You actually want to protect him. Ziwu Ji coldly said, "Little brat, this old master advises you. Don't think that just because you have some skill you can look down on others. There are some people in this great Wei dynasty you can't afford to offend." Ding Meng smiled and said, "You have a great sense of superiority. Are you the one I can't afford to offend?" As soon as his voice fell, a saber light flashed. This saber light was like a thin white line, so fast that no one could react. Ziwu Ji immediately let out a miserable cry before falling to the ground and struggling desperately. Everyone looked down and saw that Ziwu Ji's right arm had been cut off at the shoulder, blood spurting out from the wound like an arrow. Ding Meng held his saber in a backhand grip and swung it again. The severed arm that was falling from the sky was cut off with a kacha sound. There were many masters of various sects present, and their eyesight was still acceptable. Everyone was shocked to find that Ding Meng's second slash had directly cut the severed arm into 5 pieces. 5 severed arms fell on 5 different tables, falling into a pile of exquisite food. The originally delicious wine and delicacies suddenly became incomparably bloody. On the spot, someone opened his mouth and vomited loudly. Bai Longfei opened his mouth wide, unable to say anything. "Bastard, you'll die a horrible death." Shouts rang out from all around. 3 dark shadows surrounded Ding Meng from the left, right, and top 3 directions. Before Ding Meng could see who they were, Ding Meng could already see 3 balls of strong light. It was obvious that they were more powerful masters who had used their martial arts skills to attack Ding Meng. Your courage isn't small, actually daring to take the initiative to throw away your lives. Ding Meng sneered and swung his saber again. The way he wielded his saber was too sloppy and ordinary. Even a person without a foundation in martial arts could see it clearly and understand it clearly. As soon as this saber was sent out, the strong light above immediately disappeared and was replaced by 3 miserable screams. These screams were cut off halfway because what fell to the ground were 6 severed corpses: the head, the upper body, and the lower body. The sky above the manor was immediately filled with a bloody mist. Under the contrast of the snowflakes and bonfires, the bloody mist was like flowers blooming under the sun and snow. It was so beautiful that it made people want to vomit. It was so beautiful that it made people's souls fly away. Bai Longfei and Zhan Feng were both dumbfounded. The 3 people who had just flown into the sky were all legitimate imperial guards, generals, yet they could not even withstand a casual blow from Ding Meng. "Kill!" No one knew who shouted, but all the guests at the banquet moved. Dozens of figures rushed towards Ding Meng and Zhan Feng from all directions. Among these people were sect masters, rangers, imperial guards, and even valiant soldiers from the army. They all swarmed out at almost the same time, trying to use their numbers to overwhelm Ding Meng. For a moment, martial arts techniques burst forth in the sky above the manor. All kinds of origin energy flew in all directions, and all kinds of fireballs and ice walls came crashing down. The momentum was quite shocking. Ding Meng raised his saber with one hand and leveled it at his chest. The corner of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. Good timing. Back then, you people were indifferent when you saw Brother Zheng Ming's tragic death. Today, I will send all of you down to accompany him. After he finished speaking, his entire body soared into the sky and spun in a circle. With him as the center, a ring of saber light rippled out in all directions. This was the most standard 10-direction slash. The saber technique was very simple. It was just a simple swing of the saber in a circle. However, such a simple saber technique had extraordinary power in the hands of a true expert. As the saying went, "The loudest sound is silent, and the elephant is formless. This ring of saber light had achieved the extreme simplicity of complexity. Countless bright red flowers of blood flew out from the pure white saber light like red spirit butterflies. They intertwined with the dark night to form an unforgettable picture. Even the rustling snowflakes were dyed red. No one could describe this kind of beauty. It was so breathtaking, yet so tragic. Many things in the world were often like this. Often, the more beautiful something looked, the more terrifying its nature was. Death was terrifying, but it was truly fair. It didn't matter if you were a relative of the imperial family or a heroic sect master. It wouldn't let you go just because of your status. In the face of death, everyone was truly equal. There was a crashing sound in the courtyard. It was the sound of dozens of experts' flesh and blood, limbs, and internal organs scattering on the ground. The birthday banquet had completely turned into a slaughterhouse. Ding Ming returned to his original position. The cookery blade spun in circles in his palm. He surveyed the surroundings. The only people left at the scene were the family members of the dead. Ding Ming looked at Bai Longfei and said indifferently, "Our kingdom has always pursued the principle of the strongest being supreme. Whoever has the greatest ability will use their own methods. These were the words your father said that year. Let's see who dares to block my path now." Bai Longfei had been dumbstruck for a long time. These 34 people were basically the most powerful experts of the Great Wei dynasty. They actually couldn't last a single move from Ding Ming. This wasn't a human, this was a monster. This was a vengeful spirit that chased after and took lives. Bai Longfei only felt sweat dripping down his back. Just now, he had actually tried to argue with Ding Ming. Just how stupid was he? The entire place was now truly quiet. It was the kind of silence where they were afraid that Ding Ming would hear them if they breathed too heavily. In the end, they would be dismembered. These people had lived like princes their entire lives. When had they ever seen such a hellish scene of slaughter? Many of the women had already fainted on the spot. However, at this time, an aged voice suddenly sounded from the main table. "Little friend, please calm down. I wonder if I, as an outsider, can say a few words?" A white-haired, blue-clothed elder stood up from his seat. He slowly walked in front of Ding Ming. The elder's clothes were luxurious, and he had a benevolent appearance. His face maintained a warm and friendly smile. "Young man, my name is Jiaogu." This was the previous head enforcer of the kingdom, as well as the current acting monarch. He could be said to be the most powerful person in the Great Wei Kingdom. Ding Ming's eyes flickered. "I know you, the head enforcer of the kingdom." Jiaogu smiled modestly. He cupped his hands and said, "It's just a trifling position. It's not worth mentioning." Ding Ming sneered. "When Zheng Ming was killed, you were also there." Jiaogu's heart trembled, but he still smiled. "I have something to say. I wonder if little friend is willing to listen." Ding Ming coldly spat out a word. Scram. After saying that, Ji Qinshu directly slapped Jiaogu in the face. This slap sent Jiaogu flying more than 20 meters. His back hit a red pillar of a pavilion, and he fell down. He immediately opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of old blood. In fact, this slap didn't use any strength. If he had used any strength, Tin Jiaogu would have been smashed into pieces. "Mr. Jiaogu, Mr. Jiaogu." The guests were in a mess. They all ran over to help Jiaogu up. Ding Ming sneered. "Do you think I'm like Brother Zheng Ming? Do you think I'm in a mood to listen to your sophistry? I'll spare your dog life first, and then I'll deal with you later." All the guests in the hall were so shocked that their mouths were agape. They knew that Ding Ming was most likely here to cause trouble, but they didn't think that things would get so out of hand. Slapping Mr. Jiaogu in the face was the same as slapping the king in the face. Zhan Feng was incomparably indignant. Even his voice was trembling. You're making an enemy of the entire Great Wei dynasty." Ding Ming scornfully said, "The entire Great Wei kingdom doesn't have the right to be my enemy." Hearing this, Zhan Feng was completely stunned. He really didn't know how to refute this. This godlike strength did seem to be enough to make an enemy of a kingdom. While he was still in a daze, Ding Ming and Ji Chenxua walked side by side to the backyard. Bai Longfei and Zhan Feng looked at each other. They steeled their hearts and immediately chased after them. No matter what, they had to get to the bottom of this matter today. The ballroom in the backyard was very large, and it was decorated magnificently. This was because Tian Yi liked to bring the dancers of the royal dance troupe and the geisha of the brothels to this place. As for what they were doing here, everyone knew. Now, most of the clothes on Tianju's body had been taken off, and the sky wings were like a dog, lying on top of her clean body and rapidly shaking its body. Dark red blood was already flowing down Tianju's two clean, jade-like legs. Seeing this scene, Tianqing's mind went blank. He only felt as if countless bolts of lightning had struck his head. This was the feeling of being struck by lightning. In his rage, he fiercely charged forward, sending Tian Yi flying with a kick. He then picked up Tianju and cried out in a heart-wrenching voice, Zhuer, how are you? Father is here. Hurry and wake up. Hurry and wake up. Under the infusion of his origin energy, Tianju seemed to wake up from a dream. She only felt a burning pain in her lower body. When she lowered her head to look at her exposed body, as well as her two long legs dripping with blood, she clearly knew what had happened. She could not help but let out a mournful cry. Then her eyes rolled back, and she fainted again. She had fainted from anger. Tianqing was absolutely furious. He decisively got up and walked over to the 50 strings in the corner of the room. The expensive and exquisite strings had long since been smashed into a pile of junk by Tian Yi. Tianqing was burning with rage. He lifted Tian Yi up and slapped him across the face. Bastard, you're a bastard, a goddamn bastard. How could you do such a thing to your own sister? You damned bastard, 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 bastard. He was practically in tears as he yelled through gritted teeth. Furthermore, every word he said was like a heavy slap to Skywing's face, causing his handsome face to swell up at a speed visible to the naked eye. He desperately tried to circulate his origin energy, but the telekinesis field in the air firmly locked him in place. He could not move at all. As he watched Ji Chenxua get closer and closer, Bai Longfei begged, No, don't. Ji Chenxua coldly looked at him. When Big Brother Zhengming and Aunt Xiao begged you, did your father speak up for them? Bai Pinghai clearly knew that the main culprit was Heaven's Wings, but he actually secretly healed them and hid the evidence. Not killing you is already the greatest benevolence I can show you. Whoosh! The blade flashed, and Bai Longfei immediately fell to the ground. He clutched his lower body and howled like a wild boar that had been knocked to the ground. His body spasmed and bent like a shrimp. Everyone in the room watched as Bai Longfei was sentenced to death. They all trembled, not daring to open their mouths. Ding Meng's gaze fell on the nearby Zhan Feng. What about you? What do you say? Zhan Feng swallowed hard. He found it difficult to even open his mouth, let alone speak. Ding Meng's eyes shone brightly. Your father was the one who directly killed Big Brother Zhengming. Zhan Feng felt his scalp go numb. At the time, they took the initiative to fight. Ding Meng said, You mean to say that the strong are respected, and that Big Brother Zhengming's skills were not as good as theirs, so he was killed? Zhan Feng did not dare to answer, but his expression showed that he had tacitly agreed. Ding Meng sneered. Fine, I'll give you a chance now. You can attack me. If you can defeat me, I'll deal with the current situation as you wish. Zhan Feng was scared out of his wits. He would be crazy if he dared to attack Ding Meng. Even a royal guard had been killed with a single slash. As a combat master, challenging Ding Meng would be like a moth flying into a flame, like a dragonfly trying to shake a pillar. Ding Meng said disdainfully, Look at you. Even Big Brother Zhengming has the resolve to fight. You don't even have the courage to attack. I think you'd be better off dead if you continue living like this. Zhan Feng's expression froze when he heard this. He let out a furious roar and circulated all the origin energy in his body. Just as everyone thought that he was going to fight to the death, He leaped out of the window and fled into the depths of the night. No matter what, he had to preserve his life. Thus, he could only flee. Unfortunately, before he could get very far, there was a sudden scream from outside. A large hole appeared in the wall, and Jean Fong was sent flying back. He curled up on the ground like a dead dog. Everyone turned around to see Ji Chinxua leisurely walk in from outside. As for when she had left and how she had sent Jean Fong flying back, no one knew. More accurately, no one knew at all. Ding Meng turned to look at the pale-faced Jiao Gu. Sir Jiao Gu, according to the laws of the flourishing empire, how should this person be dealt with? Jiao Gu had no answer. Ding Meng said, "Let me answer for you. As an important member of the flourishing empire, harming the common people and aiding the tyrant is an additional crime. 9 generations of your family should be executed, right?" Jiao Gu's teeth were chattering. Most of the Zhan clan's members are already dead. Little Fei is the only one left. Can you be magnanimous and show mercy? Ding Meng sneered even more. When Big Brother Zheng Ming and Aunt Xiao were killed, did you consider that they were orphans? Did they have any descendants? Have you ever spoken up for them like this? Jiao Gu could only dejectedly lower his head. After Aunt Xiao committed suicide, the guards here had dragged her away like they were dealing with an animal's corpse. Jiao Gu and the other nobles were all praising Tianqing and drinking wine in celebration. As for pleading for Aunt Xiao and Zheng Ming, sorry, there was no precedent for this in this place. Ding Ming suddenly turned his head. His sharp gaze swept over Jean Feng, who was lying on the ground. Zhan Feng's 4 limbs exploded into a bloody mist. Just like by Long Fei, Zhan Feng lay on the ground and let out a shocking howl. His life had been completely ruined. This scene was too cruel. Jiao Gu couldn't help but sigh. "Sire, you shouldn't implicate your wife and children." Ding Ming coldly said, "Shut up. You hypocrites from the royal family are all high and mighty. You think that killing a few commoners is no big deal. Even after killing them, you still want to boast that you're just and honest. Because you're the royal family, you have power in your hands. Today, the tables have turned. Although I don't have power, I have strength. I think you're all ants, so killing you is no big deal. You killed people and slandered Big Brother Zheng Ming because he was instigated by someone, but I killed people because I didn't implicate his wife and children. You 2 sets of standards are very good." He looked at Jean Feng again. "I originally spared your dog life, but your partner insisted on seeking death. Remember, it was Mr. Jiao Gu who caused her death. Go to the underworld and wait for him." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhan Feng's body exploded with a pa sound, turning into countless pieces of blood that shot out in the room. He didn't even have time to scream. This time, no one dared to speak up. Back then, no one dared to offend Tianqing and chose to remain silent. Now, it was a true case of trouble comes from a mouth. If anyone dared to argue, they would lose their life. May I still be able to meet you in the next life? His voice was choked with sobs when he said the last few words. Beside him, Ji Chinxua's eyes also turned red. She understood Ding Meng's feelings. He had finally gotten his revenge, but Ding Meng was not happy. If he could, he would like to turn back time and return to 30 years ago to live with Aunt Zheng Ming and Aunt Xiao, living a poor, hard, and happy life as a woodcutter. People would always miss the past because the meaning of life was always the existence of people. Those people, especially the friends who shared weal and woe in the beginning, and the brothers who relied on each other in desperate situations. No matter how time changed, it was always difficult to forget them. Whether it was glory, splendor, wealth, or poverty, it was not the true meaning of life, but the kind of people who accompanied you through what kind of years. Ji Chinxua turned to look at Ding Meng and said, "Let's go." The reflection of the fire jumped on Ding Meng's face. He nodded and said, "Okay." Beside the bonfire in the manor's courtyard, the vivid image of a boy and a girl from a farm family vaguely appeared. Aunt Xiao had a kind and simple smile on her face, and Jinming also had a kind and friendly smile on his face. Looking at the backs of Ding Ming and Aunt Zheng, they seemed to be whispering, "Live well." As soon as they walked out of the gates of the Tian family's manor, Ding Ming stopped in his tracks. He had just retracted all of his telekinesis, and the force field in this place had been removed. On the snow-covered lawn outside, a large group of people appeared. All of them were clad in armor and wielding weapons. They were so densely packed that one couldn't even see the end of them. These were the Imperial Guards of Tianjing City. Clearly, the commotion caused by the Tian family was too big and had alarmed the royal family. At this moment, Jiao Gu was surrounded by a group of people and stood in front of the Imperial Guards. He no longer looked like he was in a daze, and he put on a hee-hee posture again. "Little friend, I advise you to surrender and accept the punishment of the kingdom's criminal law." Ding Ming laughed. "You people are really fence-sitters. You think you're high and mighty just because you brought in tens of thousands of Imperial Guards?" Jiao Gu laughed and said, "That's because you're too inexperienced. You don't know the strength of my Tianjing Imperial Guards." Ding Ming carefully glanced at the black mass of people and suddenly felt that something was wrong. When he was young, he had chopped firewood in the remote mountains. It wasn't that he had never seen the Imperial Guards of the royal family. If there was a difference between the Imperial Guards and ordinary soldiers, it would be that their armor was more luxurious and their weapons were more varied. This was because there was no lack of experts at the level of war reverends and war masters in the Imperial Guards.